and we're live. Okay, today we're going to be doing a bunch of Dedunking Dan videos. He's the guy that has done a lot of stuff with Flint Dibble, or I'm sorry, against Flint Dibble. Basically, he's taking a lot of flack for that. I'm gonna, beginning the streams as always. I do a little bit of, whatever. We hang out and wait for people to come in. What's up, JC? So if you're just joining us later, or if you're watching this not live, look below. There's a little marker to join, but first thing we're going to do, a marker to start where the actual video starts. The first one is going to be Dan's, I think it's his first video, which is about plant domestication, which I know less about than the maritime stuff. That's kind of my whole deal. So we're going to start with, however, something else. We're going to just see what's going on the Twitter. And like the video, please. Welcome. Say hi in the chat. JC will likely say hi to you once you say hi. JC's the best. So yeah, let's look at this. Okay, so this right here, this happened right as I pulled this up. Proud to say you're blocked by Flint Dibble. Yeah, it's a very common thing to be blocked by Flint Dibble. He's quite liberal. Yeah, liberal, not, well, I think he is liberal politically, but that's not the way I meant it. Liberal as in he's very he hands out blocks like candy. Like he just throws them out there. He doesn't care. He loves to block people, which is fine. That's his prerogative, He it's, if that were all he did and he wasn't doing all this other stuff, I don't know. I'd have a bigger problem with him, but or I'd have less of a problem with him. He's big mad he's not hanging with Keanu. Yeah, so that's what we're going to talk about, really. He is. So let's start a little bit down lower. So if you don't know, and we'll probably watch it right before we start the other videos, is that season 2 of Graham Hancock's show has now been announced. And it's season 2 of it. It had Keanu Reeves in it. And so what's happening? Don't sub unless this guy has 3 bachelor's degrees and 150 credits. So I've talked about this a few times, right? Like, I had, in the past, I had only brought it up a few times. We're going to digress for a moment. That's what we do here. And I recently brought it up a few times because I was talking about an interaction that I had with an archaeologist online. And the reason for me bringing it up was talking about the difference in how we evaluate information, right? This is the illegitimate scholar. You don't need a degree to watch this. You don't need a degree to talk about this type of stuff. It helps in certain ways, right? But yes, I do have 3 bachelor's degrees in history, anthropology, and education. And that was for 172 credit hours in 4 years, which is 120 is what you need for 1 degree. And to be fair, I hold that my 3 humanities liberal arts degrees were easier to get than 1 like engineering degree. Like that would have been harder. Yeah. So yes, so do sub because I do have 3 degrees and 150 plus credits, but do not sub because of that. Actually, I think I just contradicted myself, but that's okay. So yeah, Flint Dibbles, you have 130 credit hours and no degree. See, and that's the point, right? It's like you got 130 credit hours if they're semester hours or whatever, and that's enough to get a degree, but you get no degree from that. Maybe just because you didn't want to pay the last money to the college. Maybe you didn't fill out the right thing. It's like you can learn without it, man. And plus, C's get degrees. I didn't get C's, but I could have got C's and I could have still learned a lot. Yeah. Yes. The layman should be more informed in culture. We need less mind-numbing mass media and more content like Ill Scholar. I very unbiased with you, but I agree. Yes, we do. That is my unbiased opinion that we need more stuff like me. Gosh, wow, Flint's going way off about this. Gosh, I don't want to be doing this, man. Like, I don't want to be doing this. And I'm going to try to be as nice as possible because he really seems to take things very personally. Graham Hancock is promoting a harassment campaign where his allies tell his fans to call my employer to have me fired or told to shut the F up. That's this is real cancel culture. Look, we're not doing that, man. I mean, so what happened is dedunking. I mean, it's just not true. Dedunking Dan, whose videos we're going to be watching today, he got some emails from people and he publicly announced it to say, hey, don't do this. Jimmy Corsetti also said not to do this. You know, Dan said it on Twitter. He said it on YouTube. I didn't have anybody reach out to me and tell me they did something like that, but I preemptively, in response to that, said the same thing. I said, don't do that. Don't contact his employer. We don't need to do that. I've said it several times since then as other people brought it up. I actually got flack from my own audience on Twitter for saying to not do that. But really, don't. Why? Number one, they're not going to care. Number two, we don't need to get somebody fired, man. Like, we just want the information out. You call him Clint for the hell of it. This is not cancel culture. Graham Hancock isn't promoting a harassment campaign. No one is promoting a harassment campaign. It's, maybe I'm a little bit mean sometimes to him, less so recently just because it doesn't matter. But like, he was wrong about a lot. He was just wrong and he was pompous and I don't like that. And I'm going to share my views on that. That's not, and so share the debate. He says he beat him in the debate. I mean, he lied. Even the first site he showed was a lie. And I've shown that. And like I've said many times before, and I want someone to take me up on it, that I will discuss live with anybody that wants to. If you're watching this for some reason and you think Flint Dibble is right on the things that I talked about in my 2 videos on him, then please tell me why. And I've said it before. I'm sure I'm wrong about something. I'm sure I have something wrong in there, but like, he was wrong. That documents this harassment campaign where I dispute these lies about me and ask Graham to please stop boosting this slander and harassment. There's no slander. There's no harassment. Well, there probably is. I'm getting harassed too, but like, that's the internet, brother. I think you've missed it. I think you've missed yet. Watched all 4 hours. What do you mean? Okay. Flint Dibble is right because he wears a cool hat. Facts. I don't know why he did that with those headphones on, man. I mean, he's got kind of crazy hair. I think that's why. But, yeah, John Hoops, a guy that, jeez. Graham, again, sharing his own tweet, which is fine. Whereas I like all my own tweets, by the way. Yeah. But here, this is where it gets weird, right? I have no way to get in touch with Keanu Reeves. I invite him to have a frank conversation with me about archaeology. He's like, please share to see if the internet can do its thing. I mean, that's brigading, right? Am I wrong there? Please, internet, do your thing and share this far and wide. Let's share. Like, they just want people to harass Keanu Reeves and spam him. The real takeaway here is that the JRE debate went so poorly for Graham that his producers didn't trust him to sell season 2 without a celebrity guest. It was renewed a really long time ago. That doesn't make any sense. Wow, he's just sharing all these things written about it. Real archaeology is so much cooler than this made-for-TV garbage. I mean, all I did in my videos was share real archaeology. Dan did most of that. I didn't really... these weren't my own opinions. I was just looking at the sources. It's just not true, man. Netflix persists with pseudo-archaeology trash. Flint is sharing it. I mean, it's very insulting. It's condescending. Disgusting. God. Alt-right, alt-history pipeline? That's what they're talking about? With this guy? Mini Minuteman, who looks like me with less testosterone? All right. I paid too much attention to the clickbait. God, I can't do it, man. I can't sit through this. This stuff is so crazy. Let's just start the videos. I don't know if he really believes the stuff that he's saying, but like, I don't know why he pushes the idea that we want to harass him or that Dan or Gran want to harass him. Like, it's It's not true. We said the explicit opposite. No one ever promoted that. Some of the other stuff, like there's things you can criticize me on. I've been pretty harsh on Flint, not recently, but in the past. But like, oh man, I just it's just so like it doesn't have to be this way. I've tried many times to like be kind and reach out to some of these people, and I'm treated with such vitriol, which I don't know, and it's like guys, I don't know. Some of you watching might not be familiar with me, but like what I've already talked about is that I like that I have 3 bachelor's degrees, right? Like that should be enough proof that I don't hate like mainstream academia. I have my problems with it, right? And I don't believe it's the only way to think, but I also don't believe that the alternative views are the only way to think. Um and the thing with Destiny, man, he's going on with Destiny, the guy that bragged about or like he celebrated that firefighter that was ended, his life was ended by the would-be Trump assassin. Like and that's such a evil thing. And I just I don't know, man. I don't want it to be that way. I just don't. Yeah. So there's more stuff coming out on that. It's just they're bullies. They're cry bullies. I'd be willing. Look, and at any point, I've said this before. I haven't said it in a while, but if any point Flint wants to have a clean slate and stop doing this and just let it be okay that like other people think different things and there's a difference of perspective and like then it would be fine. I would forgive him and we could just talk. Thank you so much, Enchiladas, for that. I appreciate that. And for being one of the 3% of female watchers of the show. We very much appreciate that. We really appreciate that. Gatekeepers gonna gatekeep. They are. They really are. Um, yeah. I was gonna say something else. I got distracted. Destiny has always been subhuman. All right, well that's farther than I would go, but yeah, I don't think he's a good person. I'd at least say he is a person. He's a guy, but yeah, Destiny can go f himself. A man died exercising his constitutional rights. Yes, yes, that I can fully agree with. But yeah, thank you so much, Enchiladas. Really appreciate it, especially so early in the stream. I haven't even done anything yet, but that's okay. We're gonna get into some of this. Okay, so the first one, got it up here. Flint Dibble, Graham Hancock debate plant domestication and fertilization. Joe Rogan response video. Yeah, I know, Minoan. I know you're being hyperbolic. I know. I just want to, just because they'll grab anything you say, so I don't want it to look like I'm agreeing with something like that, even if I'm screwing around. And I know that you're also screwing around, and that's fine. But I have to, make that clear for people that will take a mile when you give them an inch. There was one point when no, it doesn't matter. All right, let me just throw the timestamp down below in the thing. Oh, and if you're not in the Discord link is down below. Join that. We got conversations in there going quite often. I'm trying to be more. The link is there, right? Yeah, it should be link space. It should be on the link space. Someone tell me if that link doesn't work if you try to use it. But it should work. I don't want to check it right now because I want to start the dang video. Okay. Sorry. Now the timestamp's different for starting this video. 1350. Yeah, join the Discord. Link is down below. 1350 is the time on my stream, where we're going to talk about plant domestication. When this video starts, please tell me if the audio balance between my voice. Let me know if my volume's too high, their volume's too high, how it is versus each other. I try to avoid talking during the video, but I am ADHD'd out, so sometimes it doesn't happen. But let me know with any problems with the stream always, because I am not good at tech and am quite the dummy in certain aspects. Okay, let's go.
In the recent debate between Graham Hancock and Flint Dibble on the Joe Rogan Experience,
How's that
Flint
audio?
spends a lot of time discussing the domestication of plants and how we can tell if a plant's been domesticated or not. And this section is being touted as like one of the biggest wins for Team Archaeology in the entire debate. And indeed, it does seem like Flint very much knew a lot more about it than both Graham and Joe, and the case that he made does seem pretty watertight. But is it watertight? Are all the claims that he made accurate? Is there any glaring errors that might undermine his position? Well, let's talk about that for a little bit. Hi, I'm Dan, and welcome to Dedunking. As Flint makes his case for the record not showing the domestication of plants during the Ice Age, Joe asks him the following question.
But is it possible that this cycle of domesticating wheat and beans and all these different things has taken place many, many times?
$2 a month.
And that if you left them alone, they would go back to the wild form? How long would it take for them to revert back to their original state?
Thousands of years again.
Thousands of years again.
Thousands of years.
How many thousands of years, you think?
Well, I don't know, because I'd have to look.
All right, so I'm just going to, this is a bit of a spoiler. Not really, because I don't think we were going to go over that in this. But when Flint went on Destiny's podcast very recently, he claimed that he said, that he had retracted this statement, right? That he hadn't said thousands of years, or that he had, but then he had retracted that statement. And, I'm not going to pull that clip up. I'm not going to pull up Destiny's clip, but just trust me or go watch it. He claimed he didn't say this, but what actually happened, we're just going to watch that again, is that in response, I'm a little lower than the video. Okay. Thank you. You see how that is. Is that better? In response to a question from Joe, which was how many thousands of years, he said, I don't know. And then they moved on. He didn't retract his statement. He said it would take thousands of years for fertilization to happen. And after he said that, he said, I don't know, in response to the question of how many thousands of years. So he didn't retract it. He didn't say it wouldn't take thousands of years. He said it would take thousands of years. A question was asked, and I'm being very clear on this because it is an important distinction. He responded with, I don't know. And the full sentence form of that would be, I don't know how many thousands of years, which is a very different thing. So yes, he did claim, that's a lie, right? It's lying. And, you can excuse a lot of the stuff from the debate as misremembering. Some of the stuff, he straight up claimed that a site that wasn't Ice Age was from the Ice Age. It's a possible Ice Age site, but it's not dated to the Ice Age. And even the author, that's in one of my other videos. It's a lie. He lied to Destiny. But whatever.
How long would it take for them to revert back to their original
thousands
state?
Of years again.
Thousands of years again.
Thousands of years.
How many thousands of years, you think?
Well, I don't know, because
how many thousands of years? I don't know. Right. And yes, Minnow, and he's now admitted that that's not true. He's admitted that when he said thousands of years that he was wrong. But what he claims is that he retracted the statement. But he didn't retract the statement. He answered a question, which was how many thousands of years, with the response, I don't know. He didn't say, I don't know. Maybe it's not thousands of years. I'm not sure. I'd have to check. But all he said was in response to a question, how many thousands of years? And look, if that was the only error he made, whatever, right? But it's not.
I'd have to look that up.
Well, I do know, or at least I have a pretty good idea, because about a year ago I made a video on fertilization.
And also, he showed the whole clip there. So, it's not like he was trying to pretend, Dan was trying to pretend that something happened that didn't happen.
And it's one of my earlier videos, and it's back in the days when I didn't script them, so it's kind of clunky. And by clunky, I mean the first half of it is me reiterating over and over again that I'm not a geneticist, so watch it at your own risk. But
I'm also not a
geneticist. The point is, as soon as I heard Flint say that it took thousands of years, I knew immediately that wasn't accurate. In the 2021 paper titled, When a Crop Grows Back to the Wild, Fertilization, the abstract says, fertilization can be considered, under many aspects, the opposite of domestication. During crop and animal domestication, the wild forms gradually become adapted, under a regime of artificial selection, to a new environment where humans intervene to control their growth and reproduction, e.g. in the agroecosystem. During fertilization, this process is reversed. Domesticated races escape human cultivation, return to a wild environment, or in any case start to propagate and reproduce without human intervention, and revert to phenotypes more typical of the wild forms.
Like the video, please. Yeah, so fertilization is the opposite of domestication, right? So when you domesticate a crop, it's artificial change on the crop. I think originally it was just random, but then being done intentionally. Don't quote me on that. I'm not a geneticist. or a plant scientist. And fertilization is when it goes back to being wild.
For example, typical phenotypes of feral
Like
forms
the
are the
video, my
invasive
video,
habitus
please
of some
click
of the
that
plants
like
or
button. This one
aggressive
right here.
behavior
Oh,
of
I
the
gotta like
Australian
his.
dingoes. Thus, feral species escape from a regime of artificial selection and adapt to a new environment in the absence of any deliberate human input, reassuming some of the characteristics of their ancestral, truly wild progenitors. Assuming you watched the debate, you'll know that Flint pointed out a couple of markers to look for when you're looking for domestication of plants. And basically they all revolve around seed shattering. And what that is the ability of a plant to like drop its seeds as soon as they ripen, which is something that humans do not want on our plants. So it's something that has been presumed to have been bred out for a long time. Although I have to say that Flint does say this in the debate.
It's really cool because it's not human selection either. In fact, 40 years ago when we first started studying domestication, we thought that all this was due to conscious human selection. And now we know that it's actually the plant adapting to us and what we do.
So it sounds like the
that,
consensus is now different. What's not different is the reality of a plant that drops its seeds as soon as they ripen makes for a suboptimal food source, especially in regards to grains. Grains are already small, and the early grains were even smaller, so picking them off of the plants would have been hard enough. Gathering them from the ground would be absolutely tedious. That's why we thresh grain. We beat the plant until the seeds fall off of it.
Yeah, beat
This
that
requires
plant.
a happy medium, though. If the seeds won't fall
Yeah,
off
like it
when
owes
you
you
thresh
money.
the plant, it's almost just as bad as picking the seeds out of the dirt. The seeds need to shatter from the plant under just the right amount of stress in order to be an ideal food source. Now, as Flint mentions in the debate, there are two genes that control this process in wheat, and both are fairly well understood. In rice, it's a bit more complicated, with 3 to 5 quantitative trait loci controlling seed shattering and multiple paths to shattering present in the genetic record. Now, let me repeat that. There are multiple paths to seed shattering present in the genetic record. Different parts of the plant can be utilized to encourage or discourage shattering. The abscission layer is a part that forms near the seed to hold it in place until it ripens. It can grow earlier or later, thicker or thinner. The grains themselves can break off in a few different ways, and this is all present in the record. As a matter of fact, the genetic record of rice does show a solid potential for it to have been domesticated and then fertilized into domesticated again. I mean, the QTLs, the quantitative trait loci that dictate this in rice, they're numerous, and it's a weedy mess, pun intended. But to give you an example of just how crazy this whole thing is, in the paper Asian Wild Rice is a Hybrid Swarm with extensive gene flow and fertilization from domesticated rice, we read the following. The domestication of rice remains controversial, with multiple studies reaching different conclusions regarding its origins. These studies have generally assumed that the populations of living wild rice, or Rufipogon, are descendants of the ancestral population that gave rise to domesticated rice, but relatively little attention has been paid to the origins and history of wild rice itself. Here we investigate the genetic ancestry of wild rice by analyzing a diverse panel of rice genomes consisting of 203 domesticated and 435 wild rice ascensions. We show that most modern wild rice is heavily admixed with domesticated rice through both pollen and seed-mediated gene flow. In fact, much presumed wild rice may simply represent different stages of fertilized domesticated rice. In line with this hypothesis, many presumed wild rice varieties show remnants of the effects of selective sweeps in previously identified domestication genes, as well as evidence of recent selection in flowering genes possibly associated with the fertilization process. And this is from recent times. I mean, this is, just the last few thousand years. Try to suss what happened 15, 20,000 years ago, and it's going to be a whole lot harder to discern. Just listen to the titles to these two different papers. Molecular Evidence for a Single Evolutionary Origin of Domesticated Rice, or The Rice Paradox, Multiple Origins but Single Domestication in Asian Rice.
Well, what does that
Both
mean?
of these papers can be found linked.
Multiple origins but single domestication? I don't understand rice at all. I just like it. I just
Below,
like
as
eating
can all the sources cited here, but the point is the waters are so unbelievably muddy, we cannot safely say rice was not domesticated during the Ice Age and fertilized afterwards, only to be re-domesticated again. Matter of fact, that hypothesis would explain some of the anomalies we see in the genetic record. However, like most...
Okay. Yeah, guys, I mean, this is somewhat over my head, right? Like, this is not my area, but, I haven't seen any real. I mean, just the fact that Flint responded in the way that he did, and he lied about what he said. He knows I assume he knows he lied. He must know that he responded to that question where he said he didn't know. But
most forms of digging into the deep past, unless they actually entertain the possibility of further back origins, the evidence could well be missed, even if it's sitting in a museum somewhere already. Now, some may be inclined to say that Flint was being dishonest when he said that about fertilization, but there's a couple of reasons that I will say that's not the case. And the first one is that the fertilization process completely does take a couple thousand years, they say. But the markers show up right away, like he was saying about domestication and stuff. And this is really, it's all about the plants reacting quickly to the environment, like Flint says.
Selectionary pressure. It's the pressure of humans now collecting it and then planting it. So as soon as there's one seed that's like that with that mutation, it slowly proliferates every single time humans replanted it in a new field.
So those are subtly different from each other. And the second reason that I would say that he's not lying about this is that he's not a geneticist, and fertilization is poorly understood even by geneticists.
Right. So I don't think that Flint was lying in the original debate. Just to clarify, when I say that he was lying on Destiny's podcast when he claimed that he had retracted that statement, but did not.
The thing is that, you know, like they talk about at the end of the debate, like scientists need research funding, and when you're looking into the genetics of plants, the money tends to come in farming and stuff like that. So fertilization it only shows up when it actually is like beneficial to farming or something like that. Not only, but quite commonly, that's where you're going to see it the most. For example, one of the papers I used in my research is titled "Diverse Genetic Mechanisms Underlie Worldwide Convergent Rice Fertilization," and it starts with the
Yeah, one thing I do know about this is that rice was domesticated in multiple places. It was domesticated in Africa and I think multiple places in Asia, or at least I thought that. Some say wheat and rice came from the ancient space bros. Yeah, we don't we don't go into the aliens with this that much, but that would be interesting. I probably don't believe that. I don't know how that would even work. I don't know how a lot of the alien stuff works. I haven't really. I watched Ancient Aliens when I was younger, right? And I didn't even believe it then, but I don't know. It wouldn't make sense for a species. Well, I don't know. It depends on what your perception of what the space bros is, right? But it makes the most sense to me that you would use the domestication process that you know about to domesticate crops that are native in an area, because those are going to be the ones that work the best in that environment.
Following statement. Worldwide fertilization of crop species into agricultural weeds threatens global food security. Weedy rice is a feral form of rice that infests paddies worldwide and aggressively outcompetes cultivated varieties.
The wild rice
Despite
immigrants
increasing
are coming
attention in recent years, a comprehensive understanding of the origins of weedy crop relatives and how a universal fertilization process acts as the genomic and molecular level to allow the rapid adaptation to weediness are still yet to be explored. So the research has to have real-world benefits in order to get that funding. So it's not surprising that Flint's not aware, because he's not a geneticist, and the study of fertilization doesn't really come up so much in archaeology as it does in like farming and stuff. So I give him a pass on that one. I don't think it's being dishonest. But when it comes to fertilization, in the paper I mentioned earlier, When a Crop Goes Back to the Wild, the authors say, although these recent studies of fertilization in plants revealed several genomic regions differentiating feral from their progenitor domesticated forms, it is not yet clear and to what extent fertilization involved additional direct or indirect changes affecting plant metabolism and its regulation. That's a lot of word salad there, but basically what that's saying is they're not really sure what happens when things get fertilized, but they're starting to figure it out. And that paper isn't even 4 years old, so again, not surprising he doesn't understand this stuff very well. However, the way that he portrayed it was to shut down the argument that Hancock was making, and in this case, you really can't do that.
What do you mean,
We don't know enough about rice in particular to say that it hasn't been domesticated and fertilized and domesticated again. It quite possibly could have been.
The story is that the Anunnaki made us and made food for us as well. Yeah, I just with any stories like that, you know, I don't know. I don't really put a lot of faith in the alien thing. I guess the US government says now that the aliens are here. Isn't that was like official press release, which I think made people believe it less. Right, but regardless, okay, let's say for a moment that those stories are real. Or at least that aliens did have an impact on humankind. The stories about it would have changed over time, right? So we don't know how much of it is like literal. even if it was real. But yeah, it's interesting. There's definitely something interesting about the Anunnaki and all that stuff. I don't know.
And for those of you who've watched some of my other videos, you know that my prime candidate for Atlantis or lost civilization or whatever is Polynesians or Proto-Polynesians. So maybe they went to the sea when the Ice Age went to hell and the Younger Dryas and all of that, and so they left their rice behind and it just went back to the wild. It's speculation, right? But my point here is that you can't close the door on that with the genetic record or with the microscopic record even.
Yeah, this is a big part of this argument, right? It's like I've never even talked about a lot of Graham Hancock's theories and stuff because I work heavily within, academic research. It's oh yeah, in mortuary. Yeah, you believe in the aliens. I get that. Yeah, the Polynesians are freaking cool. And demons are the aliens. They're fourth and fifth dimensional beings. I believe in other dimensions and interdimensional beings and demons more than I believe in aliens. Yeah. Oh, crap. What was I going to say? I completely forgot. Oh, I haven't really, I'm not here to prove any of Graham Hancock's theories. I'm not really interested in doing that. I'm also not interested in disproving them because I think he's exploring and searching for something. And I think that is an inherently good thing. And I don't think that I view it as a very separate thing from academic anthropology. And for the fact that, up until recently, I really, this is a cultural anthropology class and here we are, or class. Oh my God. I'm a teacher again. Cultural anthropology, YouTube channel. We don't, archaeology is something I know a little bit, but it's not my favorite thing. I like talking about this type of stuff, but I'm not trying to prove Graham Hancock's theories. I just have an issue with the way that Flint Dibble talks about this stuff, and frankly, the way that he misrepresents history. It's not like, again, we're in session. Yeah, I mean, I never got a teaching job, but I got certified to teach, did my student teaching and everything. I don't need to go deal with high schoolers. You guys are way more interested in this stuff than high schoolers would about the stuff that they make you teach. But it's not proving Graham Hancock's theories to disprove the disproof that Flint Dibble made. I mean, Flint tried to disprove it with bad information, and that's not okay. Yeah, I don't need Graham to win. I just need Flint to lose. Look, I just want to know what's true. Flint said plenty of stuff that was true, but a lot of it was not. Just wasn't.
Because they don't know. They flat out say they don't know. They can't even find out from 1,000 years ago exactly which one of these has been fertilized and which one's not. So when you look back 12, 20,000 years, no effing clue as we currently sit. Perhaps you don't believe me, but how about the Molecular Biology and Evolutionary Journal? The origin of domesticated Asian rice has been a contentious topic with conflicting evidence for either single or multiple domestication of this key crop species. Now, of course, it makes sense that the plants would revert to the most optimal way to survive. I mean, if you think about a plant that's not throwing off its seeds, it's not seed shattering, its seeds are just sitting there in the wild. So instead of sitting on the ground and growing into the next generation, it's just a snack waiting there for the next thing that comes by that eats those kinds of grains. So it's kind of critical that it throws those seeds as soon as possible. So the very first generation, the ones that really don't shatter very well, they all get eaten, and the next generation shows that shattering coming right back. So it's just as fast as the next generation. It's kind of critical that it throws those seeds as soon as possible. So the very first generation, the ones that really don't shatter very well.
Hold up, I gotta read that. Oh my God, where'd that comment go? You made a comment and pulled it away, but I wanted to share it. That's a funny ass comment. What? It just disappeared on StreamYard. What's going? Oh no, it's there. Hancock. The Giza pyramids resemble Orion's belt. Dibble. Let me pull up an archaeological dig where we found leather belts. A lot of it was like that, man. Like the metallurgy thing. We had so many of these arguments about metallurgy, and Flint was wrong about the metallurgy. He was. But also Flint said himself that Graham doesn't claim there was metallurgy. Man, they're just, I don't know. How can you think you're the good guys here? Not that there should be good or bad guys. Oh, the Bimini Road part was crazy. Dude, you're looking at straight, in a line, massive stones, and you're like, oh, this is, I don't know, doesn't look man-made to me. Nope, doesn't make sense. Like, come on, man. You're not even going to say maybe it's man-made. That was the first time that I was like, you know what? I think he's arguing from an ideological position.
And the next generation shows
Maybe
that
it was the
shattering
first.
coming right back. So it's just as fast as the domestication, the fertilization starts right away. And I think that Graham and Flint both, if they thought about this for a few...
Yeah, right? Like, if it's not, like, if it's being domesticated to a point where it's very different and it survives under human cultivation, it makes sense that the traits that kind of require human cultivation would just be gone.
Few minutes, and Joe Rogan, all three of them, if they would have thought about this for a few minutes, I'm pretty sure that they would have come to the same conclusion.
Thank you for joining us. Appreciate
complicated
it.
of a concept.
Give it a like.
Think about
Give
it.
the stream a like, please.
But
I appreciate it.
and, it's in the heat of the debate. You get all emotional. Everybody knows how that goes. You get all angry and pissy and fight, and well, we end up with what we got. Now I'll be responding to the rest of this debate like I did.
That is actually what Dibble does. He does look at tiny shards of junk. He's a well, honestly, a lot of archaeologists, they'll say themselves, like trash heaps, shell middens, not just shell middens, but any type of midden, a trash heap. Those are a gold mine for archaeologists, for good reason, to learn about a people. But yes, I think Dibble is just mad that, Graham gets he gets all the attention and he gets to talk to Keanu Reeves. All this stuff, I don't know.
This part really, we're in piecemeal, where it's like one point at a time. That way we can get into the details, and it's not like some big all-encompassing thing. That's what the debate was for. I'm going to talk about the individual portions of the debate, and we'll look into them and look behind the curtain, right? And for those of you who haven't watched me before, be well aware that I swing both ways, and that I will criticize Hancock just as quickly as I criticize Dibble. So don't get all pissy with me when you show up in the next video and I say something you don't like, because all my subscribers...
So you said this. Ancient Epoch did an excellent video on Penang and how Dibble misrepresented that paper. Okay. I did not know that. I'll have to check that out at some point. Maybe not this stream, because we're going to have a few hours of Dedunking Dan. But no, maybe near the end. Remind me again if you do that. Please like my video. My Patreon's $2 a month. But yeah, I'm sure Dedunking's is very good as well. I don't have a whole lot of stuff on there yet, though, and I apologize for that. But I'm working on it.
Have seen me say something
So that
I don't
looks like
so...
it's all for this. Oh, I skipped over one of them because I think I had talked about it recently, but we're going to go to part 3, which is the shipwrecks one, which is also something that I concentrated on and something that I know much more about. And also, Discord link is down below if you'd like to join that. Long form conversation sometimes. Pretty nice. Oh, yeah.
Pretty much everybody can
I didn't put it
tell
up.
There was one thing that Flint
So
Dibble
funny.
said on his debate with Graham Hancock on the Joe Rogan.
If you've seen my video, you've
pretty
seen me
much
talk about
everybody
this as
can
well.
tell was just off, and that was the part about the 3 million shipwrecks.
We can think about shipwrecks, right? Graham has mentioned that the bulk of marine archaeology has focused on shipwrecks and not the continental shelves. And so the thing is, at this point, we have something like 3 million shipwrecks from around the world.
Obviously, the vast majority of...
I don't know if he's going to play the other clip, but at another point during this, Flint says we have 3 million shipwrecks that have been mapped. No, that's an estimate. It was an estimate from UNESCO, according to UNESCO.
These are going to be from recent times. I mean, there was this little thing known as World War II that happened that I think 1 or 2 boats might have been sunk during. But Flint uses this whole thing to jump off into claims about boats that are directly related to Hancock's lost civilization.
And so one of my questions for Graham is, if this is a global civilization with ships, why is it that we don't have shipwrecks from this global civilization? I see this as a big, big problem. If we're looking for a civilization that's traversing the oceans, we should find these shipwrecks.
And he proceeds to make quite the case, one that we're going to go over in detail, and we'll see if he inflates the abilities of science or the knowledge that science has, like he did the numbers of shipwrecks there. So grab yourself a cold one and sit down. Hi, I'm Dan, and welcome to Dedunking.
Grab yourself cold water.
Joe did a great job moderating the event, and one example of this is the way that he would press issues and ask questions repeatedly until at least he felt that the issue was resolved. And he did that with Flint on the shipwrecks, and the result was Flint saying this.
There's this idea that things just decay the older they are, and that's really not true. It depends on the burial environment that they're in. So taphonomy is what archaeologists use to study how things survive and how they are there. And so typically when things are buried, they're very stable. Or when they're, sitting, it depends on where you are on the bottom of the ocean, but typically it's very, very stable.
Taphonomy is indeed the science of how things survive in the record, and there have been many studies that have done on marine taphonomy itself. We will focus on wood for the purposes of this video, as boats made of wood are the most common in the historical record, and would be the most likely candidate to have been used as a construction material for the ships of Graham Hancock's Lost Civilization. Wood is hands down the most common boat building material of all time, and was still the most common until about 150 years ago, even in our advanced Western cultures. And Flint tells us that...
Would it stay that way for 20,000 years, you think?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. There's this idea that...
Oh my God. Look, I hope all of you guys have seen my standalone videos on Flint. Like, this is crazy, guys. I mean, saltwater doesn't do that. It just doesn't do that.
Things just decay the older they are, and that's really not true. It depends on the burial environment that they're in.
And the environment part is right. The rate of decomposition absolutely does depend on the environment. But he also says the idea...
Dude, this comment section is, like, usually you guys are pretty funny, but right now, I am laughing at everything. This is absolutely hilarious. Yeah, and he's got my grandma called me handsome fit. Oh my God.
The idea things decay faster the older they are isn't true. And you got to compare that with what we find in a paper titled Wood Taphonomy in a Tropical Marine Carbonate Environment, Experimental Results from Lee Stocking Island, Bahamas, in which it says... Duration of exposure.
Dude, I mean, anybody who's studied this stuff before knows this. It doesn't, like, especially in saltwater, but, like, the most well-preserved shipwrecks of all time are in an anaerobic environment, not in saltwater. You have the Kitten shipwreck, which is in brackish water. That's the actual oldest shipwreck, which is 4,500 years old. I've talked about all this stuff on Twitter before. They should be in my highlights tab on Twitter. The Kitten shipwreck, I actually studied maritime archaeology under the professor, one of the leading maritime archaeologists in the entire world, who did the excavation on that site. Well, one of them, or I'm sorry, one of the archaeologists who did it. These are like big projects. And that's in an anaerobic and brackish water environment. And then you have the Vasa, which is a much younger shipwreck. It's from the 17th century, I think, which I've also written about. And that one is one of the most incredible ships in the entire world. It's absolutely terrific. How's my audio, by the way? I'm getting it's my interface is telling me it's yellow. Am I too loud? Yes, the Black Sea Minoan. That is where the kitten is. Thank you for that. Yes, it's in the Black Sea off the coast of Kitten, Bulgaria. And I believe it's the shipwreck is not named. It's just I call it the Kitten because it's by Kitten. Bulgaria. In the Black Sea, which is anaerobic, in brackish water, you have the Vasa, which is also in brackish water, cold water environment, and that's extraordinarily well preserved, and it's 400 years old, but it's already not super well preserved. Like, it's already had some damage that had to be repaired, and that's in an environment where the water is cold, and which helps preservation, and then it's brackish, so it's less salty. And even then, after 400 years, it starts breaking down. And it sank on its maiden voyage. It sank a few miles from the harbor. So it was brand new when it sank, right? But it's just not true. Like, what is true is if something is in stasis, right? If a ship is perhaps, if a ship got rapidly, and Flint touches on some of this. He was correct on some of this. He's just not correct on all of it. If a ship were to be covered by sediment underwater, and there aren't any waves that expose it, which is also a thing. He said it doesn't happen, but it does. He didn't talk about any of this stuff about shipwreck preservation. He kept talking about lithics, which is relevant to shipwrecks because a lot of older shipwrecks are identified by their lithics that were in the cargo, but that's not the point he was making. He actually was talking about wood. they're going to be preserved if they're like covered under sediment, but then you're also not going to find them, especially when you're talking about the sea levels of the last glacial maximum being 100 to 200 meters higher. It was a lot higher. Like, you're not going to find this stuff. And then all the evidence that he shows is almost exclusively in the Mediterranean, which is, you know, extraordinarily Eurocentric for him to say that like disproves anything of a global civilization that Graham Hancock doesn't even say is global at the point of having this massive global thing. It was that there was a civilization that expanded outward after a cataclysm. Like, it wasn't like they were, you know, it wasn't like 21st century trade routes. Like, that's not what we're talking about. Graham's not talking about that. But yeah.
Depositional setting and the amount and continuity of burial all contribute to the amount of limnoria attack on the surface of the wood. Limnoria is one of several wood-boring parasites on the ocean floor. You can see what they found after just 2 years underwater. This piece of wood is 2 centimeters across and it looks like Swiss cheese. These are microbes, by the way. This isn't the only wood-boring thing in the region. The paper discusses the slow disintegration of wood.
Wait.
Several types of wood, mind you. Over the course of just 2 years, they track significant loss of both volume and mass due to these things eating them. Obviously, this stands in stark contrast to the comment that Flint made.
There's this idea that things just decay the older they are, and that's really not true.
Which, to be fair, may be from Flint's experience as a terrestrial archaeologist, and this is marine taphonomy, and he does conflate them.
So taphonomy is what archaeologists use to study how things survive and how they are there. Mm-hmm. And so typically when things are buried, they're very stable. Or when they're, you know, sitting, it depends on where you are on the bottom of the ocean.
So perhaps that's where his confusion is coming from. But like he said, the environment is crucial, and basically it's the determining factor as to whether or not wood or other organic material survives long periods of time in the ocean. Which means what you're probably thinking is correct. When Joe spoke about the Endurance and its amazing state of preservation, it was due to the environment. Specifically, the Endurance sank in icy cold Antarctic waters. To quote the British historian Dan Snow, it's probably below zero. There's no wood-eating microbes and microorganisms.
Wait, hold up. A.T. Chasen, the immortician on Twitter. I've got Twitter up on the other tab. Or the immortuary. You're not still here, are you? I'm sorry. I'm getting a lot of comments. I'm trying to concentrate on this. If I said that you think that aliens are connected to Atlantis, I apologize. I did not. I don't think I said that, but if I did, it was a mistake on my end. And you know, other topics about other stuff that you found, that's great, but the stream is, you know, it's a stream that's this topic, so I apologize. And I'm not going to share the thing, but my bad, dude. I'm sorry.
Damaging the vessel. Now, I think everybody watching realizes that the longer it's on the ocean floor, the longer it's going to be eaten by those microbes. So when Flint says that the ocean floor is relatively stable, that really stands in stark contrast to the expert opinion. The consensus among scientists working directly in the field seems...
Guys, this is not, like, they don't think that. And it's like, why is Flint... Like, look, I'm illegitimate scholar, right? You're qualified to talk about whatever you want to, as long as you can just read the stuff. You can just read it and you know the information. You don't need a bachelor's. You don't need a PhD. You don't even need a bachelor's. But like, this is not what maritime archaeologists say. People that are actually specialized in it, and I rely on their information, like, to regurgitate it. Like I've talked about this before. My job is not doing straight up very in-depth research. It's, you know, communicating that research to other people.
Seems to be best summed up by award-winning science journalist Kit Chapman writing for the Royal Society for Chemistry. The state of a shipwreck depends on a host of factors: how long it's been underwater, the materials it's made from, the depth, temperature and currents of water, whether it's sank or fresh in salt water. These factors also affect the kind of creatures that will try to make the wreck their home and that are responsible for most of the damage and degradation. The Endurance was so well preserved because the microorganisms that typically devour a wooden wreck do not live in the cold, hostile waters of the Antarctic. So the statement that it's typically stable is flat out wrong. If you're a piece of wood, the ocean floor is a hellhole of things eating Swiss cheese and stuff like that to you. And if it's cold, you're in better shape. And there's other factors that can apply as well. If you're buried with silt, you could be in better shape. Or if the salinity is really high or something like that. There's a number of different...
Jacob, like, Flint literally claimed that things that a shipwreck at the bottom of the ocean would survive for 20 or 30 thousands of years, stable. Like it would just stay the way it is. And that's obviously not true. It's very obviously not true. I don't know why he tried to say that. I just don't. Especially using the example, which I've talked about in my other video. I don't know if Dan gets into it, but the shipwreck that he talked about that was 7,000 years old was a freaking canoe. It was a few canoes they found in a lake. And the reason that's very important is because it's in a lake. It's not a shipwreck. It's in a lake. It's in a it probably wasn't wrecked. It was probably placed there for storage. And you know, a lake is not salt water, so it's much more stable and it's much easier to find. It's like, yeah, nothing disturbs the sediment bearing stuff, but like it just stays there. Yeah, we would find ancient logs on the bottom. Like, if this were true, there would just be, like, trees piling up at the bottom of the ocean forever. Like, the Mediterranean would just be a gold mine for a forester to go down there and dredge it up. Like, what are we talking about here, guys? Yeah, anaerobic environments aren't exactly common on the ocean floor, as far as I know. Yes, that's true. There's specific places where they are, very specific places. And those are the best places for preservation, as well as those other factors that we have. And cold and not salt water. So shipwrecks in the ocean is very difficult. And most of the evidence that Flint brings up is in the Mediterranean. It's not even the real ocean.
Different things that can play into this. But one of the ones that does play in almost everywhere is chemical equilibrium, or like homeostasis.
So in general, wood will decay. So, you know, in a lot of underwater environments, it'll just preserve as long as it's in homeostasis.
This is basically the chemical balance between the object and its surroundings. Once it chemically doesn't stand out, it's not really food or whatever for the other critters, and at this point, barnacles and the like will usually cover the object, which then will cover the ship in concretions, they're called. They're hard, mineral-rich layers that serve as a sort of armor. This will protect the shipwreck from further predation. Even the current has trouble penetrating the rigid skin that the barnacles leave behind. This leaves these weird casts of the vessel. The ship's mostly gone with just little that remains is covered in hard minerals. You've seen these sort of images before. And once this has occurred, the ship can last for a long time in this state, but not forever. Eventually, the wood, because it's hollowed out, will collapse under the weight of the concretions, and the ship will be lost. This is why most shipwrecks, even ones that are considered generally well preserved, are more or less piles of debris. Flint talks about one where the nets are intact, and this shipwreck is considered to be very intact.
I mean, the preservation
Balfour
underwater is amazing. There's the shipwreck off the coast of Italy that I just presented, what was on the Bad Boy of Science YouTube.
I talked about this one as well in my other video. I don't remember the specifics. Maybe this will jog my memory. But this was in a very specific environment, and the archaeologists that actually excavated it say that it was a rare shipwreck. I mean, this was one of the only Bronze Age ships, merchantmen, that they found. I think it was a merchantman ship, and there would have been hundreds, thousands maybe, of those ships lost during the Bronze Age. So like we only got a few of them.
About shipwrecks and stuff. And there's still the vine netting that was holding the Roman cargo was still preserved.
Wow. I mean, it is well preserved, but it's also a complete wreck. At 2,000 years old, the state of preservation is pretty remarkable. But it covered in mud immediately upon seeing...
Right. Just the fact that it's remarkable at being that old shows that Flint is wrong about his other point, because it is remarkable. If not, we'd be finding all of these things.
And like a fossil, the situation that allowed for this to happen is very unique. Also, like the fossil record, we know we only get a tiny fraction of a percent of what actually has happened in the record. And despite Flint's claims otherwise, time is definitely a factor on how long something will survive on the ocean floor. I mean, there's places like the Black Sea that have some remarkably well-preserved shipwrecks there, but that's due to the higher salinity and the lack of things eating them, and they still eventually collapse and crumble and fall to crap. And that's not part of the world's oceans anyway, so it doesn't even really count when we're looking at Graham Hancock's Lost Civilization. The way Flint uses a hole in the record to disprove Hancock reminds me of a creationist asking where the missing link is. Flint is well aware the record is spotty, but he wants to use that lack of something being in it as proof that it doesn't exist. But he's not even thinking his position through, at least not how it relates to Hancock's. Flint has told us why things get preserved, and I've made sure you, the viewer, know the basics of what he said and how the science works. Equilibrium with the environment, covered in mud or silt, encased in barnacles and their mineral-rich secretions, or extreme circumstances like cold or high salinity are what it takes to preserve a shipwreck. All these conditions rely on stability.
Wait, did he say high salinity?
Encased in barnacles and their mineral-rich secretions, or extreme circumstances like cold or high salinity, are what it takes.
Cold or high salinity? Is extremely high salinity good for preservation? I've never heard of this. Like regular salinity, where does it say that? I wish he had like a... He's reading this, right?
To preserve things get preserved, and I've made sure you, the viewer, know the basics of what he said and how the science works. Equilibrium with the environment, covered in mud or silt, encased in barnacles and their mineral-rich secretions, or extreme circumstances like cold or high salinity, are what it takes to preserve a shipwreck. All these conditions rely on stability, the water staying the same temperature, the currents flowing the same, the silt covering the ship consistently. But Hancock's proposed lost civilization was said to have been wiped out by a flood, the oceans of the world causing the destruction on the land. Now, of course, this is contentious. There's a lot of debates about it. The Younger Dryas impact hypothesis and all of that, and there's two very distinct camps fighting about it. And since we have that going on, we can be pretty certain that this debate won't be resolved satisfactorily anytime soon. But what we do know is that the Younger Dryas was a time of extreme climate change in the record. Nobody's going to argue that. And it also changed this.
Yeah, dude, this is something. I've actually had arguments with people. Not really arguments, but like there are people on Twitter who have argued about the Younger Dryas. The Younger Dryas happened. It's a time period that happened. What people argue about is the Younger Dryas impact theory, how it happened. Different thing. But yeah.
Sediment layers in the ocean, and it changed the Gulf Stream in the ocean. It changed shit in the ocean a lot. In the following quote from the 2015 paper, The Role of the Gulf Stream in the European Climate, they discuss the changes to the Atlantic meridional overturning circulation, a part of the Gulf Stream that is responsible for carrying warm water from the tropics to Europe. Myriad proxies from sediment cores suggest that variations in Gulf Stream transport are coincident with swings in European climate over the past 15,000 years. For example, protactinium-231 and thorium-230 ratios suggest that the rate of the North Atlantic deep water export in the deep branch of the Atlantic meridional overturning circulation, AMOC, was reduced during the Younger Dryas cooling, implying an equal reduction in mass flux of the shallow branch of the AMOC. Oxygen isotopes of benthic foraminifera, a type of protozoa, straddling the Gulf Stream on either side of the Florida Straits, are consistent with a smaller temperature contrast across the straits during the Younger Dryas, which is interpreted as a reduced density gradient and a smaller geostrophic Gulf Stream transport. This reduced geostrophic Gulf Stream transport could be associated with a slowdown in either the AMOC or wind-driven components of the Gulf Stream. Nutrient proxies with carbon isotopes and cadmium suggest that during the Younger Dryas, the deep North Atlantic was filled with high nutrient waters, an indicator that this area of the ocean was more sluggishly ventilated and thus the AMOC transport was reduced. Now, there's a lot of words there, and there's a lot to unpack.
I don't know what that...
The whole Gulf Stream and everything that happened to the Younger Dryas, and that's really outside the scope of this video. But what's important to take note of is that science is very clear that during the time that would have been the destruction of Graham Hancock's lost civilization, the oceans were tumultuous. Things were under a lot of change. So all of the conditions that Flint describes would have potentially been under heavy fire. Things underwater were moving around. The Gulf Stream changed. If it was in cold water, it may well find itself getting hammered with warm water for a minute. If it had been buried with silt, it may find itself uncovered with silt. It was a rough time to be in the seas, and Flint's well aware of this. And if he really thought about this with like an open mind and was trying to have a fair conversation instead of debunk Hancock, he would have known that this was the case and that his point wasn't really going to get very far. But he kind of had blinders on through this whole thing. He kind of had like a little bit of a double standard thing going on and stuff. And my next point will show that kind of, to those people. Some people might argue with me. My final point, you can't really argue with it as far as I'm concerned. It definitely shows pretty clear double standard. Now, Joe does mention the notion of water moving sediment off the wrecks and exposing them to predation again. Pay close attention to how Flint words this.
Now, what about the shifting of sediment at the bottom of the ocean when you're dealing with things like 10, 20,000 years ago, 30,000 years ago?
Yeah, so there's actually, I was just talking with Jessica Cook Hale out of Bradford about this.
God.
And actually,
Jessica Cook Hale, right. I went to this video, and actually the first site that Flint chooses to share in this video, in that interview he did on his podcast channel, or his YouTube channel, Jessica Cook Hale called the first site that Flint presented a bit of hyperbole, even in its own conclusions, when that site, which Flint claimed was an Ice Age site, the author of that paper doesn't even claim that it's an Ice Age site. He claims it's a Younger Dryas, which is Ice Age, or a early Holocene. But the only evidence he has, the only evidence, by the way, there's not even evidence of human artifacts there. It's said that it's a hunting wall based on the orientation of the wall, which is fine. If like that makes sense. I have to take them at their word because I'm not familiar with those methodologies. But like, she called the paper on its face without Flint describing and calling it an Ice Age site a bit of hyperbole, which it is, because it's not a good argument that it is a possible Pleistocene site when you do two different types of dating, one of them radiocarbon, and you get times of 9,800 years before present, which is what happened, which is not, it's several thousand years after the Younger Dryas. And then you're going to claim that that's an Ice Age site. And the other dating was older, but it was like 10,800, still after the Younger Dryas, 500 meters away, I think, many meters away. And neither of them actually had human artifacts dated. It was organic material that they dated in the absence of actual human artifacts, which is fine if you establish that the hunting wall is human in origin based on its orientation. But like, he didn't explain any of that, and he claimed it was an Ice Age site, which again, the author of that paper does not claim.
So she's done some studies off the coast of Florida of sort of hurricanes that are coming in today, because she's excavating Stone Age shell mounds there. And it's
yeah, and so Flint Dibble, Flint Dibble, he's talking about little lithic scatters, okay? And he never talked about like shipwrecks. Like, absolutely, hurricanes can screw with shipwrecks. They didn't in this one particular case. I read the paper. It's just yes, I believe that Flint Dibble did lie about that particular site. Yes, I think that's accurate. But shipwrecks, if you just search shipwrecks washed up on beach, you have news articles of shipwrecks washing up on the beach. Like, this happens when they're moving around. So yes, they'll get moved around. And Flint here is like just saying that that's not true.
People might argue with me. My final point, you can't really argue with it as far as I'm concerned. It definitely shows pretty clear double standard. Now, Joe does mention the notion of water moving sediment off the wrecks and exposing them to predation again. Pay close attention to how Flint words this.
Now, what about the shifting of sediment at the bottom of the ocean when you're dealing with things like 10, 20,000 years ago, 30,000
Remember what I
years
just
ago?
showed you?
Yeah, so that there's
I
actually
just showed you a shipwreck
Jessica
washed up on the
Cook Hale out
beach.
of Bradford about this, and actually, so she's done some studies off the coast of Florida of sort of hurricanes that are coming in today, because she's excavating Stone Age shell mounds there, and it turns out actually that the hurricanes coming in today really don't disturb them much at all.
Come on, dude! It's like you're not even trying. Like, did you really think no one was going to call you out on this?
He answers a question about the sediment.
Am I crazy here? What do you guys think? Am I crazy? Like, this is ridiculous.
General, with a specific answer that only applies to hurricanes and other surface activities. As I showed in the paper just a second ago, the Gulf Stream changes. This concept is simple. Glaciers melt or other increasing water flow causes more sediment to end up in the sea. Shifting currents changes the sediment on things that were long covered. This is covered in extreme detail in a couple of papers that I'll link below. Post-glacial flooding of the Bering Land Bridge dated to 11,000 before present based on new geophysical and sediment records, and rapid oceanic and atmospheric changes during the Younger Dryas cold period. The clearest, easiest quote that I can give you from a legit scientific paper comes from the Sedimentary System Response to the Global Sea Level in the East China Sea since the last glacial maximum. The abstract says, the East China Seas, ECS, is one of the world's largest continental shelf seas. Based on the combination of global sea level changes and sequence stratigraphy, we systematically investigated the evolution of sedimentary system in the ECS since the last glacial maximum, LGM.
You guys are
We have
killing me.
defined the transgressive boundary layer and constructed several sedimentary models of the ECS on the sequence stratigraphy and evolution of tidal sand ridges since the LGM, and sediment sourced to sink during the high sea level. The result shows that the ECS represents a typical case for the large-scale continental shelf response to global sea level change. 3 sedimentary system tracts have been formed in the ECS since the LGM. First is a low stand system tract corresponding to the late of the last glaciation in LGM. The progressive wedge occurred along the Okinawa Trough slope and the Paleocoastal zone along the continental shelf edge. Second is a transgressive system tract that corresponds to the last deglaciation. A large-scale transgressive boundary layer and tidal sand ridges were formed in this stage. Third is the high stand system tract corresponding to the high sea level. Notice they say this is a typical case. They have 3 different types of changes in the way that the sediment's laid on the ocean floor right there, on the continental shelf where all the shipwrecks and stuff happen, right? 3 different types when the sea level rise, and this is typical. I mean, I could belabor this point for a minute, but I think what's important to point out here is that when Flint spoke about surface level activity like hurricanes, he's not really taking into account the things that Hancock would definitely posit, which would be a flood, which would definitely change the way things are, as science knows. So that was, again, he just kind of dodged the issue there. It seems like a heavy double standard here, or at the very least, like just seriously not thinking things through. Because sediment isn't stable after a flood, neither is temperature. And that's why the oldest boat that we have found is from a bog. It's not from the ocean. Bogs are an environment that stays considerably more stable than the open seas do. The boat is called the Pesse canoe, and it's about 9,000 or 10,000 years old. Now, when you go back into Roman times and before, there's actually very...
And that one, like, Flint mistakenly identified the 7,000-year one as being off the coast in the ocean, which is why he brought that one up. But it wasn't in the ocean. He was just mistaken or wrong. I assume he was just mistaken, right? I mean, he was wrong, but I don't think he intentionally did that. But yes, the oldest actual shipwreck, well, the oldest intact is the Kitten, which I talked about. And then the oldest non-intact, actually, I think it was discovered after it's the Docus, 4,500 years old, but that one was identified by its cargo. That was 4,500 or so years old.
Very little in the record, not very much at all in the way of shipwrecks. But we do have some signs of boats being used long before then even. The Gobestan rock art shows a ship, and it's about 20,000 years old. On the Isle of Wight, a prehistoric boat building site was discovered in 2005. The director of the Maritime Archaeological Trust, Gary Member, had this to say about the site. The site contains a wealth of evidence for technological skills that were not thought to have been developed for a further couple thousand of years, such as advanced woodworking. This site shows the value of marine archaeology for understanding the development of civilization. Now, there's other evidence.
Yeah, and so he didn't go into any of the evidence that I did. It's funny because this video, I hadn't seen this video when I put out my video on maritime archaeology, and I used almost entirely different evidence to disprove Flint. But these 2 videos together, his and mine on maritime archaeology, are pretty phenomenal, I think, because like the stuff that I showed was from Melanesia. It's mostly Australian archaeologists. And they show much farther back, 30,000, 40,000 years, and they've never found a ship. They've never found a ship there. I wonder why, or really they would have been like canoes, but they showed, based on the makeup of, I think it was chert or obsidian, some sort of mineral or rock or something, moving between these islands that were, tens of kilometers away, like 50, 100 kilometers, different times. There's like 8 examples of it. There's even evidence of Homo erectus doing this 850,000 years ago, but that's just one piece of evidence of that. At times for these sites that we know that the sea level was at a certain point where they would have had to be going on crafts for relatively long distances. I mean, that's not nothing, 50 kilometers. Some more, some a little bit less, but you're not swimming that, man. You're not swimming that. And then the Kelp Highway hypothesis, which Flint brings up, it's like the leading theory to replace Clovis first is this Kelp Highway hypothesis. And Flint talks about it, but he doesn't bring up that the kelp highway hypothesis includes the use of boats to do it, and we've never found a boat from that either. Like, the evidence for there being boats back then that we have never found is substantial. It's very, very substantial.
Evidence too that people in Southeast Asia, that happened like hundreds of thousands of years ago, and there's all kinds of little things like that exist all over the world. Even they think even Neanderthals had boats at this point. And you're probably wondering, why would Dan bring up Neanderthals having boats in this video? Well, there's a strong reason. That goes to that second thing I was going to tell you, as to like the double standards or just the blinders, however you want to look at it. We're talking hundreds of thousands of years of people having used boats. They traveled around the globe doing all kinds of stuff, at least tens of thousands of years. Yet we have no boat in the record from the time from 10,000 BC all the way back. We have that canoe as the oldest one. So Flint accepts that people were using boats 20,000 years ago. I mean, I assume he does. I don't see him in anybody's videos like Stefan Milo's video yelling at him about it. I don't see anything like that. What I do see is him saying that no matter how long something's underwater, it should be okay. So if we're talking hundreds of thousands of years of people using boats, even if they were just, regular old small wooden craft, according to Flint's metrics, we should have tons of them in the water. They should be all over the damn place. On the continental shelves where they look, there should be tons of these ancient ships. We should at least find them. But we don't. That doesn't change Flint's opinion on whether or not they exist.
Why, Flint?
But when we're talking about Hancock's boats, all of a sudden,
I see this as a big, big problem.
Now, and he's not alone here. This debate's being held up as this big win for team science, and it's too bad because a lot of the science was misrepresented to the point that I could be making videos about this for months. I won't do that, and so that's not a threat, but I will be covering it in a few more videos, and I definitely want to talk at least one about just kind of the overarching strategy, freaking psychological things that come out of this whole mess, because I think that people are missing the boat pretty heavily on that so far. A handful of people see it, but nobody on the YouTube so far. And anyway, I like to tell you guys what I think. So you're going to get that coming down the pipes too. But I also am going to have to, criticize where Hancock went wrong at some point in this thing too, which we'll be doing. But right now, the way that Flint's scientific arguments is being touted is so awesome, I kind of feel like I have to address those first, because a lot of the science there is just 3 million shipwrecks. Come on, man. It's so blatantly transparent that it's got all of his buddies going, yeah. But the people on the fence, or the people that were Hancock believers, he ain't really swaying very many. I know that we have some people commenting to the contrary on that, and we'll talk about that in the
I've had people commenting to the contrary, saying that I or other people, well, I haven't seen them for other people. I assume that they have, because they have much bigger audiences than me, but saying that they changed their mind on Flint. Like, I just like this stuff, right? Like, I just want to talk about it. I don't want to have this doesn't have to be like a personal thing. I don't know. Yeah. Okay. Next one. Let's go. This one.
Can we say there's no...
Oh, hey, like the video, please. Like the video. I would appreciate it. If you did, you went down, click that little like, the thumbs up thing, and subscribe if you're not. See more stuff like this. Most of what I do is culture anthropology. Got the podcast, and join the Discord if you want to do that.
Evidence for an advanced civilization in what they have studied.
In what they have studied, yes, we can say there's no evidence for an advanced civilization.
We heard
in the
Graham
context
Hancock that...
In the context, dude, this is a lie. I mean, it's intentionally misquoting him. They were talking about archaeological evidence, which is the evidence that archaeologists decide is good enough for them, and how they judge it.
There is no evidence for his lost ice age civilization.
Atlantis is dead, guys. Atlantis as an idea, it's dead. And Flint Dibble, he might have killed it. What was really strange, though, was that at about an hour and a half through, Graham concedes that none of the archaeology we have at the minute supports the existence of Atlantis.
Well, crap, it seems like there's not even a...
Just so we're clear, he'll probably go into it, but a lot of Graham's issues were that they're not studying certain things. He's literally asking them to study certain things, like Gunung Padang and like the Bimini Road, and they won't.
A reason for me to make this video, right? Open and shut case. So why did I even turn on the lights or the camera or the action? So, hi, I'm Dan, and welcome to the end of this episode of Dedunking. Alright, so obviously there's something to talk about here, but what is it? Well, let's start by looking at the entire quote instead of just that little piece that Flint showed us.
Yeah, I can go back up there.
We're looking at
Bimini?
less than 5% of the continental shelves that have been studied at all.
Oh,
in
Melio, okay.
archaeology. I'm not surprised that we find hunter-gatherer traces underwater. I'm very glad that we do. I would be very surprised if we didn't. But what I'm saying is that not enough of that 27 million square kilometers has been investigated. Only a tiny.
Thank you for that $5, Legend. I really appreciate it. You're lost again, Luffy. What is Luffy? I'm not familiar with this, and I'm gonna restart. I shouldn't have stopped in the middle of this quote, but
traces underwater. I'm very glad that we do. I would be very surprised if we didn't. But what I'm saying is that not enough of that 27 million square kilometers has been investigated. Only a tiny fraction has been investigated.
And it has. And Flint actually lied about this. I think it's a lie. I actually can't confirm that it is a lie. But Flint, in a Guardian article, claimed that there were hundreds of thousands of sites in the Sahara. And he actually addressed this indirectly to me on Twitter because he has me blocked because he's scared. He addressed this by bringing up archaeology sites in the Horn of Africa, which is not in the Sahara. The coverage in the Sahara is very bad. There's a lot of reasons for that. We're going to be going into more of it later. But yes, thank you. Who is Luffy? But thank you for the $5. Thank you very much. I'm more interested in anthropology, and even then I'm not a big fan of reader/watcher of such content. Yes. Yes. So, I mean, most of this channel is anthropology, right? It's cultural anthropology, but you know, we move into the other social studies and the other fields of anthropology every once in a while, mostly archaeology, because that's the other one that I know a lot about. I don't know a lot of the others. Oh, Luffy from One Piece. Yes, I'm a weeb with a 9 to 5. I don't recommend because it's stupid long. Yeah, I tried to watch it once and I liked it. And then I realized there's like 1,000 episodes and I was like, I'm not going to do this. It's one of the few animes I've ever watched because I like pirates, you know. Yes, and I was on iHypocrite a long time ago, not in a galaxy far away, but a long time ago. But thank you for being here. Thank you for talking about this stuff.
And that fraction.
Yeah, iHypocrite's audience, by the way, they did not like me very much. I'm not like a lot of his audience is pretty extreme. And no problem with you, Red Raptor, or anyone else from there, but I think I said some things on there that they didn't like. I was a little bit too left for them, which I consider myself pretty right. So, you know, yeah.
Is not enough to draw the conclusion that we can absolutely say
Graham
there
is
was
right.
no lost civilization.
He's right.
Same goes for the Amazon rainforest. Same goes for the Sahara Desert.
But can we say there's no evidence for an advanced civilization in what they have studied?
In what they have studied, yes, we can say there's no evidence for an advanced civilization.
So here it is quite clear they're talking about the underwater archaeology that's been done, not all the archeology on the entire planet. Here, listen to the beginning of the clip.
They may have
again.
called me soy boy.
I can go back up there.
I think there was an issue. Literally, this is what we're gonna keep going on this. I don't want to get too sidetracked, but I think I don't want to give it too much. Freaking like, because this was a long time ago. I don't remember it, but I think basically I said that I wasn't racist. I said that I wasn't racist because I'm not racist, and some other things about that, and I think they didn't like me on that. Oh, are other people from iHypocrite? So this was like specific parts of it. It wasn't like the entire time, and it wasn't everybody, of course. But yeah, I got no problem with iHypocrite or any of you guys here from them. I thank you for watching me. It was just, I remembered at one point people in the comments, I was watching them and they were mad as hell. Yeah, no, and no need to apologize on behalf of his audience, guys. I mean, he's great. His audience is great. You know, he has some opinions I don't agree with. Obviously, I don't agree with the opinions of everybody, and obviously I'm not. But I you know, I like him, and he brought me on when I was much smaller, and I appreciate that. And I got no issue with any of them.
We're looking at
Bimini?
less than 5% of the continental shelves that have been studied at all by archaeologists.
Now, Graham does mention the Amazon and the Sahara, so this is still a case of Atlantis of the gaps. But my point here is the quote is being completely misconstrued. He's talking about underwater archaeology only, and they're making it out to be, oh, you know, he said there's no evidence whatsoever of his lost civilization.
So it was just about maritime archaeology as well. I didn't even realize that. And he was still just talking about archaeological evidence. Wow, that's weak, guys. That's really weak. I mean, and why does Flint have to do that? And why don't people care? I mean, that's clearly dishonest. And whatever.
And Flint kicked that off. Let's be very clear about that. And let's also be clear. If you were to ask Mr. Hancock, hey, Graham, what do you think about the evidence for your lost civilization? What would you provide? He would immediately go to the things that he's mentioned in his books. It's not like I have to speculate very hard here. He would say things like the Piri Reis map, the Erroneous Phineas map, the astronomy that some of these ancient civilizations had that he would say is out of place. Now, you might not agree with those as evidence, but that's what he would call evidence.
Right.
Myths.
It's not
legends,
archaeological evidence.
gigantic stone edifices that he believes could not be built without some form of higher technology than we attribute to the ancients.
Raptor. Yeah, I'm actually going to address it again. Being one of the good ones, that never works out with that. Yeah, it doesn't. Yeah.
For example, even the Great Pyramid falls into this.
Now, the Great Pyramid of Giza is probably the most stunning of all these ancient structures. And the stones are immense, and some of them were cut from a quarry that's hundreds of miles away. How do you think they did that?
Well, some of them, the granite in the Great Pyramid comes from more than 500 miles to the south. If you look at the famous King's Chamber, its walls and its roof are, the ceiling of the King's Chamber are all made with gigantic granite blocks.
Stunning detail.
Stunning detail. Those blocks on the roof of the King's Chamber weigh 70 tons each. Now, Egyptologists will tell you that, they could move heavy blocks because they put them on wet sand and they push them along on wet sand. Well, maybe if you're just at ground level, that will do. But when you're 350 feet above the ground, as you are in the King's Chamber, that won't do at all. I don't know how they did it. All I know is they did it. I don't think anybody knows how they did it, how they lifted those stones, how they brought them up to that level. I think we're looking, again, at a lost technology.
Yes, I just proved to you that Graham Hancock believes the pyramids are products of ancient high technology in order to counter an argument made by an archaeologist.
JC, why?
We truly live in a bizarro world. One where everyone pretends they don't know what they do in order to feel like they gotta win by proxy on Joe Rogan. It's kind of scary, to be honest, because this isn't new. Hancock has always claimed his evidence consists of myth, legend, a few quote-unquote precision things in the record, and the massive stone structures we see around the world. And Flint is completely aware of this. As a matter of fact, he led with this in the debate as a mutually agreed upon thing between him and Mr. Hancock. Check it out.
Graham is in many ways the first person to admit that the evidence he has is fingerprints. It's kind of what he thinks is this technological transmission to hunter-gatherers, but he does not have any direct dated evidence of this civilization. It's, after all, a lost civilization, right?
So it is a bit underhanded to then hold up a clip of Hancock agreeing with that point, one Dibble highlights that is in fact an agreed upon point out the gate, and then say, haha, gotcha, especially when he's removed some of the context. And the result of this dishonesty? Well, I showed you a little taste of it at the beginning of this video. There are tons of people that just show up and be like, oh, Hancock said he has no evidence. What are you even talking about? And that's not what he said. But Flint sure made sure that that's how it went out into the world. Flint Dibble then points out we have thousands of underwater hunter-gatherer archaeological sites in the record, and this is true. But he really does ignore a few glaring issues when it comes to what he expects to find. We find stone, and that's basically it, besides a few small exceptions. In archaeology, these are known as lithic specimens. They're pieces of stone that have been worked by human hands. From something as intricate and arguably made from high-tech as the Schitt's disc, to a piece of stone that was knocked off of an arrowhead as it was being made. All of these are known as lithic specimens to archaeologists, and they're considered evidence for human habitation and all that jazz. But what about the evidence for ancient high technology in the record? What would happen if some of that were actually to turn up? Well, a serious problem faced by underwater archaeologists is treasure hunters. Shipwrecks in particular are targeted and looted without being reported all the time, and this has been a problem since before archaeology was
Yeah.
even a word. In an essay titled Treasure Hunters Pose Problems for Archaeologists, the
They
following
also, treasure hunters, famously, the amount of money they spend on treasure hunting costs more than what they make as a whole. I think it's like gambling. Like some of them specifically do make some money, but then there are certain times where like they find a ship that belonged to the Spanish Navy in like the 1600s. I think this is one specific one I'm remembering. Um, and the Spanish take it back.
account of a recent organized looting of a shipwreck is given. On October 5th, 1804, the frigate La
Belongs in a
Mercedes
museum.
came to the end of its journey at the bottom of the sea near Cape of St. Mary at the south of Portugal. A surprise attack by the English wiped out the fleet, which was about to reach its destination. At the time, the two nations were at peace. However, that didn't matter much to the British Royal Navy. The tides and the fish were the silent guardians of the treasure, which remained with the sunken Mercedes for more than 2 centuries. That is, until its discovery was announced with great fanfare in 2007. Since 1999, electric lights and robotic submarines have been periodically disturbing the peace of the seabed in secret. The company Odyssey Marine Exploration was sweeping the bottom of the sea in search of the wreck, even though this was a potentially delicate archaeological site. It found its target, almost 600,000 silver and gold coins minted in Peru during the time of Charles IV, the King of Spain. The coins were transferred from Gibraltar to Florida, where Odyssey had its headquarters. However, the Spanish government initiated a lawsuit against the company. In 2011, the 11th Circuit Court of Appeals in Atlanta, Georgia, upheld the decision of a Florida judge who ruled in favor of Spain. The coins were returned in
This is what I
2012
was
under
talking
a
about.
legal
I guess it
decision
was
that no longer
19th
allowed
century.
any type of appeal or reversal. However, investigators still discovered that the company had wrongfully hidden some of the objects recovered from the site in Gibraltar. In the end, the
Okay.
company was forced to return everything and pay a large sum of court costs. So even today, with all the laws protecting underwater archaeological sites from treasure hunters are still a big problem, even in the form of like organized companies going to do it. And we don't know for sure what they hid totally. We just know what we found out that they hid. They may have hid all kinds of cool stuff that we don't know. I've talked about this kind of thing before. Where are the missing artifacts? I believe is the name of the video. There'll be a link down below. The thumbnail looks like that. You know how to
I think a lot of the missing artifacts. Yeah, look, actually, I agree. This is a problem. It especially sucks because like we don't get to learn as a people. This stuff doesn't get made public, so we don't learn about the history that would be learned from that with these treasure hunters. Unfortunately, but there are also issues of the mainstream scientists and archaeologists themselves. The amount of stuff that's just sitting downstairs in some Smithsonian warehouse is absolutely massive. The amount of stuff that they don't bring up, the mismanagement, like that's a problem in mainstream archaeology. It shouldn't be like, it's the problem with treasure hunting is like, yeah, that's a problem. But then there's another problem, which is that the standard is just for it to go to these other people who have their own issues, less issues than treasure hunters, I would say, but it doesn't mean they're above any sort of criticism.
find my other videos. I assume if you're watching me, you're astute enough to figure that one out. That's what it looks like if you're interested. But one thing I didn't get into there was if we think of the possibility 10,000 years ago, there were people looking for treasure
It's from
underwater.
Waterworld?
With technology that
good
they
movie.
recently lost being their primary focus, right? They're looking for old, cool tech. It wouldn't be a surprise at all that all we found today was stone, with the occasional piece seeming a bit too well made for the time that it came from, but that's about it. Or consider the possibility of 10,000 years of treasure hunting on the coasts. I mean, people would keep the sites secret as long as possible and loot them as much as they could, but the more unique the piece, the more sought after it is, and there's plenty of rich buyers that can change a fisherman's life. And this has been a thing for hundreds of years, if not thousands. Obviously, this is less of an evidence-based argument than it is a logical one, but I personally think it holds up pretty well. I mean, what would you do tomorrow if the end of the world was...
Mainstream scientists, they're not well known for their freaking like logic. They're just regular old logical thinking. They get over socialized.
Happening. What would you go loot shit at all? Yeah, I think so, and I don't think you'd be alone. And then 50 years from now, your offspring, what would they be doing? What would they be searching for when they were going around the world trying to survive? I mean, I don't think it's a big stretch to say that these kinds of artifacts would be super duper hard to find within 100 years, like completely gone from the record. Now, that's not saying that we should never find anything that is anomalous, that we should never find anything like that. It is saying that when these kinds of things turn up, the museums that's willing to put somebody's name on a plaque is firmly in like 1,000th place after eBay, Craigslist, auction houses, black market deals. You get what I'm saying here. There's a lot of shit that's just not going to be in the record. Ironically, antiquities theft and looting is where archaeology began. Collectors wrote books and looked for ways to catalog their collections. And as time went on, this became part of academia, but its origins were in stealing artifacts and selling them to collectors or placing them in Western museums. From the earliest days of Egyptology to the noble savage myth of the 19th century American anthropologists, procuring artifacts from indigenous people has been a central focus of archaeology since its inception. Now, why do I mention this? Well, in that Society for American Archaeology letter, Dibble and others accuse Hancock of spreading white supremacist rhetoric, and their reasoning is Hancock cites sources from the 19th century that are problematic. But modern Egyptologists still cite their early founders, like Flinders Petrie, a eugenicist who was outspoken about the thing. He shows up all the time in the citations of Egyptology. He's straight up racist by modern standards. So the idea that Graham Hancock citing Ignatius Donnelly, who's a guy that was, by today's standards, would certainly be a racist, but back in those days, he was an abolitionist and considered a progressive. So the idea that this...
I thought this guy was like a straight up KKK member based on the way that Flint talked about it. Are you serious? He was an abolitionist? And a progressive? And that's who they're picking? Are you serious, man? This is crazy.
This make Hancock's work somehow...
I just didn't look into it because I didn't care. It wasn't relevant. That's wild. Those...
Part of a tradition of white supremacist rhetoric is laughable when it's coming from an archaeologist. But that's the broad brush approach. You know, I frequently point out that's kind of bullshit. So let's look at Flint himself. Flint is a teacher at Dartmouth. And as you can see in the debate, like many teachers...
Yeah, that was a mistake. Flint is at Cardiff University in the UK. And yeah, I guess Flint got really mad that he used to be at Dartmouth, I think, because actually, yeah, I think he was at Dartmouth. And he has... Dartmouth still has his page up there. And it's like the first one you get when you search. But I found that he's actually at Cardiff. But like, that's not that big of a deal, man. It's not consequential to anything, unlike a lot of Flint's lies and mistakes.
He likes to use visual aids, real tangible things, to illustrate his point. Dartmouth recently had a problem. In 2023, they had to reevaluate the remains on the campus as they were not in compliance with the Native American Graves and Repatriation Act, called NAGPRA for short. I'll let the then standing president of Dartmouth explain the issue, as he did then to the press. President Philip J. Hanlon, 77, apologized for Dartmouth's wrongful possession of Native American ancestral remains and the resulting trauma to Native American and indigenous members of the Dartmouth community and to the greater Indian country. I am deeply saddened by...
Okay, well, this isn't necessarily relevant to Flint since he's not there, but I guess he was there while this was happening. But it does show what mainstream academia does. You know, NAGPRA was put in the 90s. They've had a long time. I mean, this is a serious federal law. This is not nothing. Guys, don't be calling each other stupid in the comments. Or do. As long as you're being joking.
By what we found on our campus, says President
Also,
Hammond.
I'm not your dad,
On
so
behalf
it's fine.
of Dartmouth,
Also, like
I sincerely apologize to our entire community. This is an extremely painful discovery, especially for Native Americans and Indigenous students and alumni, and for the faculty and staff who believed in good faith that they were not teaching with ancestral remains in their classrooms and labs. Did you catch that last part? Staff teaching in classrooms and labs with ancestral remains of Indigenous Americans?
Oh, man.
Staff like Flint Dibble, who likes
Wait, but like, even if Flint Dibble is not there anymore, that means that he could have been doing that. I mean, he probably didn't know, right? But like, that's bad. That's really bad. That's something I take pretty seriously. I mean, I did some stuff on the changes to NAGPRA, which expanded it and I think are pretty bad. But like, I always have said that NAGPRA itself, like the original idea, like it's good. There was a lot of grave robbing and taking actual bones and remains of Native Americans, specifically of Native Americans. Ugh, that's crazy, man.
Likes to use a lot of hands-on stuff. From his About page, I'm an innovative teacher who challenges students to think outside of the box and write clear, evidence-based narratives. My goal is to always provide a hands-on experience with the past through primary sources. So there's a very real possibility that at some point Flint was teaching a class with an illegal Native American bone in his hand, immorally obtained and illegal to still be holding. Now, he didn't know that at the time, and maybe it wasn't even him. Maybe it was a colleague of his, but certainly somebody there, the president, said so, right? And here's the issue. This is the kind of thing I would normally never talk about because this is something they have to clean their own house. This is history correcting itself. We're getting more modern. We're figuring shit out. We fix the sins of our past as best we can. But Flint wants to say, oh, look at Graham Hancock's tradition of racism. Look at all these Atlantis hunting people and their tradition of racism because Ignatius Donnelly said some words. So compare the words Ignatius Donnelly said to the still holding bones that you're not supposed to be, quite possibly teaching them in a class when Native Americans might well believe that those bones should not be in a shoebox or in a classroom.
Are we all in agreement on that? Don't we all think that, not just Native American bones, the reason it's concentrated on Native Americans is because this happened a lot. But like, we can all agree, right? You shouldn't be grave robbing bones and then using them as a teaching tool. Does anybody disagree with that? That's wild.
Or a lab, they should be respected and buried in accordance with their religious beliefs. Who is doing the most damage today, right now? It's an absolutely absurd proposition for Flint to come out and say that Graham Hancock stuff is spreading this kind of crap when he's working at an institution that has to make these kinds of apologies still today. And no matter how Flint wants to spin this, nobody is holding the bones of indigenous people in the name of Graham Hancock. But Flint, he'll just try to diminish all this and he'll just say,
I'm asking you to distance yourself from that is actually what I'm trying to do.
But that's not what you're doing, though.
In the debate, he says this, but nowhere else does he ever say this. Just watch how he waffles here. Watch. For all the rest of his confidence that he portrayed throughout the debate, he was nervous, but he had some confidence. When Joe hit him with this one, when Graham hit him with this one and Joe held his feet to it, boy, oh boy, did the flight part of fight or flight kick in, and we just got a bunch of bullshit.
Archaeologist Flint Dibble says Hancock's claims reinforce white supremacist ideas, stripping indigenous people of their rich heritage, and instead giving credit to aliens or white people. Actually, I've never...
Did you really say that?
No, I said that this idea of Atlantis...
Yeah, you did say that. That was a quote. You said that, Flint. You're lying.
It goes back 200 years. It has been used for those reasons.
So are you saying your quote is incorrect?
I think that it's editing me out of context.
That's what you said, dude.
Graham, I've never called you a white supremacist or a racist.
No one said you did.
Credit away.
You did
from
basically
local
the same thing.
cultures of their heritage.
Right, but he's not doing that.
I never said he did. I said that he's citing these sources.
But this is something that is a very nuanced subject. Mm-hmm. And when you say that it reinforces white supremacy...
Again, I said the sources do.
Reinforce white supremacist ideas, stripping indigenous people of the rich heritage, and instead giving credit to aliens or white people. None of those things are true.
I know. Graham doesn't even talk about aliens.
Right, but
and so that's
did
why
you say that?
I said that not in specific relation to Hancock's claims, but in specific relation to this narrative of Atlantis that has gone back hundreds of years.
As Dibble, here's the Guardian. So they're misquoting you, are they? As Dibble states, such claims reinforce white supremacist ideas. They strip indigenous people of their rich heritage.
So he said, quote, his claims, Graham's claims, reinforce these things. It's not functionally different, dude.
Heritage, and instead give credit to aliens or white people. Why didn't you get the Guardian to put that right?
Well, I don't.
Did you
decide
actually
if
say
they
that,
were.
though?
I did not say that Graham reinforces white supremacist ideas. As I
No, you just said that his claims do that. Come on, Flint.
said,
So this
the
quote is not
history,
real?
They stripped the stories of Atlantis. Yes, right.
So the quote,
And-
reinforce white supremacist ideas, that's not yours.
No, that's not a quote. It's not in quotation.
Right, it was in the other article. That's what I'm getting
And
to.
again,
They
in that-
strip indigenous people of their rich heritage and give credit to aliens or white people.
Well-
In short, the series promotes ideas of race science that are outdated and long debunked. And this is your
See, that's even worse. The series promotes. So Graham's series promotes ideas of race science. That's what Flint said. That's calling him racist, dude. Like, that's not functionally different than actually saying that you're a racist. It's trying to provide evidence that someone is a racist. Bunk evidence, BS evidence, but that's worse.
your
I did not
own.
say.
Right, but
This
that's
is your
not
own.
his quote,
This is
though.
your own article, Flint. Here you are. I'm quoting from that.
certainly not a
quote from
wombat.
your article
Wombats
published
are
in
way
the
too cool.
conversation.
So this
the
quote is not
history-
real?
They stripped the stories of Atlantis. Yes, right.
So the
And-
quote reinforce white supremacist ideas, that's not yours.
No, that's not a quote. It's not in quotation.
Right, it was in the other article.
And he knows he's full of shit. Here's all of his talk of white supremacy in the article he wrote right after the debate. My goal is to share the magnitude and diversity of human achievement. Pseudo-archaeology robs indigenous peoples of their heritage. Hancock's narrative of engineering feats from some lost civilization includes a sphinx in Africa, pyramids in Mesoamerica, and an enormous terraced monument in Indonesia. Does it include Stonehenge? No. Hancock says ancient British people built that. Hancock and other pseudo-archaeologists center white Europeans as able creators while chalking up the accomplishments of other peoples to outside influencers, the Atlantis civilization, aliens, lizard people, or the lost empire of Tartaria. Real archaeology
Tartaria, that's a
inoculates
funny one,
people
dude.
against the online and in-person racists who take Hancock's polished presentation of a mysterious civilization and twist it into overt white supremacy. So where exactly did Flint ask Graham Hancock to distance himself from white supremacy? He didn't, despite claiming so in the Joe Rogan thing and being like, oh yeah, man, that's all I'm out. I'm not calling you a racist. I just want you to distance yourself from those guys. In reality, he don't care about that. He never mentions it. I'll link a bunch of the stuff down below where he's cried about this stuff. He never mentions distancing yourself from that. Instead, he conflates all the way to Tartaria, stuff that like a lot of the guys that get a little questionable with it go to. Flint will conflate Hancock with all of it before he gives him any benefit of the doubt at all. It's so intellectually dishonest that, well, here we are. Normally I accept people thinking differently than each other.
Dude, and I've said this before, this comment. Like, archaeologists quote more racist than Hancock ever did. So what, man? Like, yeah, they do. You're right. But, like, this isn't a valid criticism. It's like, number one, it's one citation from a book 150, or his book, Graham's book 30 years ago. Like, he's written like 20 books. And, like, using evidence from somebody who has a theory and was racist, like, the evidence that they used to support that theory that they had, even if the other evidence they used is like fake even and made up, that doesn't discount that evidence. Like, I don't think I could find it in my bookcase, but I'm actually here. I have a book somewhere on Soviet archaeology here. Does that make me a communist? Am I a communist because I read this Soviet archaeology book? No. It's ridiculous, dude.
Qualifies as evidence for one person just won't for another quite frequently, and in most things I'm completely tolerant of this. I don't believe in this or that, but I won't call you stupid if you believe in it. But when it comes to character assassination like we see here, I don't find this a legitimate belief held by Flint
Yeah, I'm a
and
commie
friends.
now.
I think this is their psychological justification for acting like assholes. Putting things into print that are absolutely abhorrent, and it worked great in the debate because Hancock was upset about it before it even started, and Flint could just be like, hey man, I just want to talk about the evidence. I don't know what your deal is here. But try finding an article that he's written on Hancock that doesn't include these tacit accusations of spreading racist bullshit, and then see if it actually asks him to distance himself from those people. An archaeologist who may well have illegally held Native American bones in his hands while teaching, calling a guy like Hancock a spreader of white supremacist rhetoric is like a Holocaust camp executioner calling an edgy 4chan poster out for spreading white supremacist rhetoric. As Jesus is quoted as saying, remove the log from your own eye before removing the splinter from your brother's eye. That way you can see clearly when you go to take out that sliver. In other words, clean your damn house before you go pointing fingers, Flint. This is why I rail against debunkers who misspeak more than pseudoscientists who I think are completely wrong. Perhaps you have heard of the Milgram experiment? After World War II, wanting to understand how Germany got normal people to commit atrocities against their neighbors, Stanley Milgram conducted an experiment in which scientists in lab coats instructed test subjects to administer electric shocks to other people. The people receiving the shocks were actors, and the point of the experiment was to see how far the test subject would take the experiment before stopping. As many as 65% of the test subjects would administer shocks up to the point that they believed it would be lethal if they were instructed to do so by a scientist. To be honest, this experiment focused on authority in general, but specifically it was scientific authority being represented here. If the impartial person who has more knowledge than I says carry on, well, I'm going to effing carry on. And that was how the public perceived scientists in 1963. But in recent years, the damage to the reputation of science in general has been troubling to me. Not because I want to dress up in a lab coat and zap people who piss me off.
That's a good point, John. Those test subjects, they trusted the science. That's what happens. People trust institutions, which is why I am the illegitimate scholar. Because I don't. Also, I think higher academia, higher education has like a 36% trust, positive trust from people in the most recent Gallup poll. Like, people don't trust them. That's not our fault. It's not my fault. I didn't make people not trust them. It's their own actions.
Anyway, my issue with these sort of things is that they erode the public's faith in science in a manner that I don't think Flint or many others, even guys like Andrew Rakich from Aughton Films, who really has a nuanced take film on this debate, he doesn't seem to have noticed this at all. By treating this discussion like a debate instead of
test this hypothesis in a fair way,
he demonstrated a lack of scientificness, I guess you could say. I mean, the impartiality you would expect from a scientist was completely devoid from his arguments. Instead, they were all-encompassing, full of errors that kind of landed on his side of the fence, just happened to at any rate, and basically wouldn't even own the worst shit that he did to Hancock before the debate. It was Weasley. Apparently he doesn't realize that outside his small community that this does look unscientific as hell. He betrays ego as a motivating factor to any astute observer. Indeed, his entire video covering the aftermath of the debate is dripping with smug comments.
So how did it go is the question I always get. How did it go? Well, let's see. Roll the clip.
But can we say there's no evidence for an advanced civilization in what they have studied?
In what they have studied, yes, we can say there's no evidence for an advanced civilization.
We heard from Graham Hancock that there is no evidence for his lost.
Oh my God. That's not what he said.
Ice Age civilization. This is one of the memes that somebody sent me, and ding, ding, ding. Yeah, I feel pretty good. Clearly, I went in as...
He doesn't feel so good now after he realized people are responding the way they are. Oh, man. No, Jacob, your joke was good. Your joke was good. I laughed at it. I'm getting a lot of comments.
Prepared as I could, and there's a whole lot of stuff. I probably only shared 20 to 30%.
I'll take the helicopter ride.
What I was able to show was, fortunately, just how much evidence we have. We have so much evidence, archaeological evidence, all over the globe. You know, I talked about one of the surveys he did in Egypt in the Sahara. Graham saying archaeologists have not surveyed the Sahara. Man, plentiful surveys of the Sahara have happened, and plentiful Stone Age artifacts have been found.
Now, he's feeling his oats now, and I understand that, but he's not reaching the people that he wants to reach. Instead, he's preaching to the choir. Do you remember the SAA letter that I mentioned earlier, the one that Hancock mentions in the debate? In it, 3 reasons are listed for the Society of American Archaeologists requesting the documentary be reclassified as fiction. The first reason listed tells us what the real problem is, why they wrote that letter, why they combat guys like Hancock, and why they frequently get so overzealous that a dumb electrician can highlight the issues in their arguments. The reason is The host of the series repeatedly and
didn't
vigorously
land.
dismisses
Oh, I see it.
archaeologists and the practice of archaeology with aggressive rhetoric, willfully seeking to cause harm to our membership and our profession in the public eye. The second reason highlights the difference between Hancock's theories and the academic consensus. What you would actually expect. Third is the BS cries of racism I mentioned earlier. Their number one reason is personal attacks. You make archaeologists look bad, well, you make us all look bad, and we're going to come in there. And then Flint came in there, guns a-blazing, in it to win it. But it's all ego-driven, man. Just science, no, fucking nothing to do with science. It's just ego. In my video, Archaeology Needs a Carl Sagan, I point out that the tactics Flint used here is basically wasted efforts. They could be making stories sound more fun and therefore more interesting to the public, but instead they play whack-a-mole with opposing ideas like Atlantis. Now, in my opinion, this is totally a losing proposition for him. And check out that video if you're interested. The link is below. I mention this because Flint is pushing the opposite direction. He didn't just laugh uncomfortably or whatever. He is misrepresenting.
Do you notice in that video with Flint how like boisterous and like confident he is versus the way he acted in the debate, which a lot of the time was like fake confidence and like the guy could barely look Graham in the eye. I mean, it's ridiculous. He blocks everybody. That's just whatever.
Presenting the science openly in order to try to win this debate. And this is the kind of thing that is just, it is not going to pan out well in the long term.
No,
I'm not the only
not.
person noticing this. Even Chris Dunn did it at the end of his appearance on Joe Rogan. The entire Atlantis hunting community is looking at Flint's arguments with a fine-tooth comb. And most of us are seeing the same thing. A lot of misrepresentation and a whole lot of ego.
Dude, you went on the biggest podcast in the world and you said verifiably untrue things to support your argument. What did you think was going to happen? I mean, all of these sycophants that are going to follow you no matter what, they're going to fall right in line like the little beaten dogs they are. But other people, there are other people who will actually think about the evidence and look at it, and they're not going to feel that way. They're just not. Oh, I didn't go to the next video. Okay. Which one do we want to do next? Society of American Archaeology are all women except one man. I mean, it's like a group of 5,000 people. They're not all women, right? I think archaeology and anthropology in general is disproportionately women, but I don't think they're all women. What are you talking about, Smeagol? What you talking about? I mean, I know that, Flint Dibble is, you can call him a woman, I guess. I don't know. I don't want to misgender Flint Dibble. Let's see. Alrighty, World of Antiquity. Or you know what? Let's keep it on theme here. Let's hear from our good friend Jimmy Corsetti. I mean, this is Dedunking, but I don't know what this video is about. I mean, it's relevant, but
recently did a hangout on his channel, Bright Insight.
Oh, Smeagol, you're talking about the staff.
2 hours.
Yeah, that
makes
makes
sense. One of the
sense.
things that we discussed was the Flint Dibble debate with Graham Hancock on the Joe Rogan Experience, and the reaction that I've received from the archaeological community since calling out Flint on the falsehoods that he put out to millions of people. Now, I know a lot of people don't like to watch 2 hours of two people just talking back and forth, making jokes and laughing to get the little tidbits of real info in between that we would normally edit out and do what I'm doing right here. Here's about 10 minutes of me and Jimmy talking with all the little BS stuff edited out. Hi, my name's Dan and welcome to Dedunking.
You've been making all kinds of videos. So you are this guy in this realm that I consider to be the most sane out of anybody. You're a skeptic. You don't agree with everything that I say. You've done some debunk videos on me. But you also are...
Notice how Jimmy is fine with that, right? Like, it's very different. Like, Jimmy, it's okay to disagree. It's okay if you're watching this and you're disagreeing with my takes. It's okay if... Like, I've had in my comment sections, like, Zionists arguing with anti-Semites. It's fine, guys. You can disagree. It's such a ego-headed thing that so many of these people have. I don't like it. Please like the video if you haven't already. I've probably said that 15 times, but it's, people filtering in and filtering out.
Are so good-spirited about it. And you also identify and will say, hey, oh, wait a second. Oh, no, he has a thought on this that's actually true. And you're like this guy that's been kind of like in the middle in like the most delightful way imaginable. It's like
and by the way, as soon as Dedunking started disagreeing with the mainstream, he used to be in their good graces. As soon as he stopped being completely in line with them, they just, I mean, I shouldn't standardize all of them, but that's the general feeling. They just hate him. And that sucks, man. It's unscientific, frankly.
like a breath of fresh air because I'm learning all kinds
hit it
of
3
things
times.
from
Don't
you.
hit it twice. That'll unlike it.
You know you're doing things right because all the archaeologists were warming up to you and loving you. And then as soon as you share a few things that contradicts things that say Flint Dibble had shared, now they're all wildly against you and talking about you all the time. So you're doing something right, my friend. So you've been digging into stuff. You were the guy that helped expose a lot of inaccuracies that Flint had shared. Why don't we dive into that? People are here. They want to know. So I guess we could kind of backburn the racism
you're on
thing.
Twitter.
I will tell
You
people
can't
that,
like it.
hey, they can go look at Flint's Twitter, and they'll see that he had done far more than he led on. And he, in my opinion, he lied through his teeth, trying to backtrack how he had associated Graham with racism and other things. We can backburn that for a few minutes, but let's talk about the real details involving the actual scientific data that he shared that was a vast misrepresentation of the truth. And it was done so in order to score a point at Graham's expense in front of millions of people.
It misled millions of people. And that's where I was appalled. Like, the racism thing was the first thing that clued me into he was being dishonest. When I saw that, I'm like, I know you know that's a lie, sir. But when this went a little bit further, when I was watching it later, and he's talking about the plants, and he says that it takes thousands of years for plants to revert to a feral state, and that's where you've got a domesticated crop, and then it goes back to the wild. People don't tend to it for 1,000 years, and what happens to it? And it doesn't take 1,000 years for it to return to the wild, though. It happens like overnight almost. In a single generation, there's signs. And I knew that because I'd already researched it. So I started digging into that and realized that.
And wait, why did he claim that? Like, because Flint's an actual, like, food archaeologist. That's his specialty. That's what he knows about. The maritime stuff, I get it. Like, why would he know about that? I don't know why he would try to talk about it when he doesn't know. But, yeah.
He completely misrepresented. And then Joe asked him specifically how long, and he's like, well, I don't know. And it's like, well, you shouldn't be saying that it's thousands of years then, because that's not thousands of years. Just say that you don't know and put a pin in it. But you couldn't do that and sew this shut. In his mind, he was just making this watertight case in his debate and making sure Joe saw a hole in it. Well, what about the plants reverting to a feral state? Oh, nope, that can't be. Shut that down right away. And he did it just almost off a knee-jerk reaction. It wasn't like that clued me in there that he was really willing to bend the truth on a scientific level, as well as not just protecting his own personal stuff when regards to the racism thing.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about the ice core samples, because I think that was a profound example of
I don't care about the metallurgy
of the data.
Even Flint said it, but yeah, he was still wrong.
Stated definitively that, hey, look, here's this graph. There has been no metallurgy found in the ice core samples from the Ice Age. This would have been evidence of lost civilization. It doesn't exist. Therefore, Graham Hancock debunked. But you did some digging and you contacted a legitimate scientist who studies ice core samples personally. And why don't you share with us what that revealed? Because not everyone here has been following the Twitter. Sure. They're not familiar with your work. And I will tell people, as soon as they get a chance, hit subscribe on Dan's channel. It is a goldmine of awesome info.
Well, thank you. The ice cores.
I don't know. I don't know in a general sense if they feel that way, if they don't like sudden or sporadic evolutionary events. I know that like catastrophism, like gradual shifts in not just archaeology, but science in general. I know sometimes I say that archaeology is, especially on Twitter, I'll just say archaeology is not a science because it riles people up. I don't really I find defining it as a science or not completely arbitrary. But like all scientists, like it used to be a common thing, gradual changes, but catastrophism and I'm trying to search for the word here. I don't know if someone could help me out in the comments, but these sudden shifts in things, both in geology and archaeology, I think yes, historically, and less so recently. Yeah.
Flint was very same kind of thing. He was very overarching and overreaching, even in his statement that there we can say beyond a shadow of a doubt that there was no large scale metallurgy in the Ice Age. And then he shows the graph that is from a paper that goes back to 1100 BC. So it's like 3,000 years of Hancock's 12,000 minimum. So it's right off the bat, it's like, okay, man, that's
gradualism.
Just a little sleight of hand here. Hope nobody looks at this graph. Carry on.
Things change quickly as I'm like
the reality of it is, when it comes to metallurgy in the Ice Age, they do go with lead, which is what he talked about, and they do absolutely look for that on a general sense. But there's a lot of reasons that lead can be kicked up. If there's lower there's lower sea levels due to higher glaciation levels, that will cause more dust, and that will put more lead into the ice cores. And that's the same lead. If you go dig in the ground in the Sahara, and you kick up a bunch of dust.
And I've said it before, I'll say it again. The Great Flood myth is an indigenous myth from Western culture as well as many other cultures. You see it across a bunch of cultures, and that is very strange. And while these are the same types of people who are always talking about how we need to honor indigenous myths and stuff, which I agree with, I do agree with it, but you need to be honest, Plato is also an indigenous myth, and there's truth in indigenous myths. But yeah, this gets into the redefining of indigenous to have to do with subsistence strategy, and but that's BS, man. It's BS.
Or if the wind blows real hard in the Sahara and kicks up a bunch of dust, it creates the same isotopic signature in the ice when it gets deposited there. So it's very difficult for them to differentiate between whether or not it's low-tech metallurgy. Now, modern stuff, obviously, there's a whole kinds of isotopes that you just don't find in nature. But when you're talking old school metallurgy, it's really difficult to distinguish.
And again, for those of you who haven't seen it already, like Flint Dibble knows and said himself, and also that Graham Hancock does not claim metallurgy in the Ice Age. And there are plenty of advanced societies, like advanced is a relative term, but no one argues that the Aztecs and the Incas and the Mayans were not advanced. They were definitely advanced by any definition, and yet they don't have large-scale metallurgy. Like, there's no linear progression to human civilization. It can be very, very different. That's what's so cool about it. It's one of my favorite things about it. It's why I study it so much. But yeah.
And so they don't test for metallurgy going any further back than they have an archaeological site that would tell them to test for. So when he says we know for a fact, they haven't tested. They simply have not tested in the Ice Age for metallurgy. So it's just a lie. That's just misrepresenting the data we have.
Right. And that's exactly how he presented it, though. He had stated definitively that they had. And I guess a lot of people don't realize that when it comes to scientific testing, everything costs money. They're going to pay for some analyst, I suppose, to go through the data. And they're not just going to test for everything under the sun, because it takes time. And God knows what their hourly rates are to test for something like that.
Oh, gosh, yeah.
And so, but the graph, though, this is the thing. So this is why people need to watch your video, because you hammered it home so well. You got straight into it, where you show the graph. Like, this is what Flint said, plays the clip, shows this graph, and then like you zoom in on the graph basically and show like this is not in the time frame. It only went back 3,000.
Yeah, so I've went back and I've listened to Flint Dibble say this like 15 times, probably more than that actually. And I think that the way that Flint said it was his syntax was so weird. But like in the same sentence, or in the same paragraph, maybe I guess he's not writing, he's speaking. So it's up to, not important. He like talks about like, oh, we can test for this, like in the Roman period. And then he makes a statement about like, so we can definitively prove that there was no metallurgy in the Ice Age, but like the graph that he was showing wasn't definitively proving that. And then other times he's talked about how like he showed sources for everything that he claimed, which is not true. But gosh,
1,000 years. When Flint is presenting it, like, oh, this is the heart of the Ice Age. See, nothing. That's not true. And
why would you have that on the screen?
Either he didn't know it and he jumped the gun and made a mistake, which is possible. But his reaction since has been nothing but doubling down. It's like, it'd be one thing to say, okay, you know what? Thank you for the correction. I was under the impression that that's what it was. My mistake. And then he still could have covered his own butt by saying, however, you still can't show me proof that there was metal in the Ice Age. And he could save face that way and feel like he didn't lose the argument. But he's behaving in a way that is so dishonest that it's like, okay, maybe you purposely did lie and then you got caught and now you're trying to cover it up, because anyone can make a mistake. And all you have to do is say afterwards, like, whoops, my bad. And most people, they're like, okay, they don't even care. People move on.
I get yelled at a lot ever since I got noticed.
Well, okay, so I want people to understand like the cancel culture that goes on in this archaeological realm, because like you come out of the gate, this really nice guy, you're giving credit all over. You're saying, hey, no, this is good here on this side. The alternatives are right on this. The archaeologists are right on this. You're wrong. Very, very neutral in a way that everyone was gravitating towards you. You have me and Graham Hancock gravitating towards you. All the archaeologists are gravitating towards you.
Dude, and that's the thing, man. Like, different groups of people, different ways of thinking, they all have their pros and cons. Like, they all have benefits to them. They all have bad things about them. They all have weaknesses and strengths. And we would all be better off if we just worked together in an honest way. But that's not happening for whatever reason. Like, I wish it wasn't like that.
And as soon as you called out Flint for making mistakes on that podcast, like they wanted to burn you at the stake in such a spectacular fashion that it was like, whoa, like, yeah, see, these people are nasty.
It was amazing to me. I knew that they were already mad at me because the Society for American Archaeology wrote that letter to Netflix, and it contained a lie in it. And I'd been calling them out on that and holding them accountable for it for a while. And Flint was one of the people whose name was on that letter. And so I'd already had some of the archaeologists that were not as nice to me as they were a month before that. But yeah, when I pointed out that he was just being dishonest at points, boy, now I'm not impartial. I'm a grifter. I mean, I have people that I haven't even met yelling about my video and calling me a grifter when they find out that I'm the one that made it. Oh, you're the grifter. I'm like, what? I'm the grifter. What? My very first shout out was if Milo Rossi's Mini Minuteman's last Ancient Apocalypse debunking video. That beginning of that, he calls me basically the one good Graham Hancock fan. I mean, that's in his mind. Like it's I've been on good. I had a good relationship with most of the people on both sides of the fence for most of the time that I've been here. But yes, this is really telling because I tried numerous times to like point out these things gently as it got to this point.
Yeah, it is telling. It's very, very, very telling. All right, I got more videos here. More Dan, 2 hours in. We're gonna keep it going here for a little bit. Let's do this one. He lied again? Who lied? What did they lie about?
Video where I discussed a certain archaeologist who was trying to silence me by, let's just say, less than scrupulous means, okay? Now, I did mention, and I gave him the benefit of the doubt, and I did tell him it's not cool, but I missed something. I missed the forest for the trees. This is not a one-off. This is something we see archaeologists do frequently. When they have their egos challenged by a critic, many archaeologists seem to think that it's okay to react in manners that are completely unethical. And I think most people would recognize them as unethical, but for some reason these guys don't. Now, it's happened a couple times in our community in just the last little bit, and that's not the only place that it happens. So I'm going to show this to my regular viewers so you can see just how kind of messed up and widespread this is. And I also want to let archaeologists see how, man, this really isn't a proper tactic to apply. It looks kind of bad, looks kind of ugly. So let's discuss how some archaeologists like to silence their critics through unscrupulous means. Hi, my name is Dan, and welcome to Dedunking.
Welcome to Dedunking. I'm starting to really like that. Heard it a bunch of times today.
Now, the most public example of this would probably be Graham Hancock being banned from filming in Egypt after him and Zahi Hawass had a public falling out.
Okay, so after inspiring probably tens of thousands of people to go to the pyramids like myself, you managed to get banned from Egypt?
Yes.
Is it a real full-time ban?
This is not clear to me, and this is when it happened. Is that my Netflix series Ancient Apocalypse? We wanted to film an episode in Egypt, which you would have thought the Egyptian authorities would welcome, but when they asked who is presenting the show, and we said that Graham Hancock is presenting the show.
They said no.
They said absolutely no way. Everything was much less sensitive until 2015, when I had the beginnings of a public debate with who is regarded as the leading Egyptian Egyptologist, Zahi Hawass. And unfortunately, in that debate, Zahi, it's actually on YouTube, bits of it, because there was a member of the audience present. Zahi massively lost his temper.
I haven't even seen this.
Go away from me!
Whoa.
Shame on you. Why you say something to me? Why? I don't know. This man did bad things. I don't want to his death. This man. And I'm going to court. I'm going to let this man enter this country.
And you can't really say that Zahi is trying to protect the integrity of Egyptology or anything like that, because he has no problem with pyramidiates or New Agers.
What's this? Thank you so much. What is that? Australian dollars? A10? Thank you for that. Very, very generous donation. I appreciate it. Archaeology attempts to sell itself as evolution, but it's not. Darwin's theory has been proven time and again. Archaeology can't prove any of its prehistory theories. Yeah, so this is very important. So this is this is a point that's like that. This is why I say sometimes that archaeology is not a real science, even though I don't necessarily even feel that way. I'll say it. I might agree with it, but I also think it's a completely arbitrary statement, because what is and isn't science is like, I bring that up so that there can then be a conversation greater about what science is and what qualifies as scientific evidence. Archaeology has evidence, like archaeology does have scientific evidence. Like there are scientific methods that are very, carbon dating. Obviously any of these can have problems. Like there's problems even in like hard sciences like physics, right? There's certain issues with things, but those methods are pretty much like, they're pretty set in stone in a non-arbitrary way more than a lot of other things. Whereas in archaeology, a lot of the conclusions are so based in interpretation that there is a lot wrong with calling that a science. It's like, the reason I bring it up is because science, if you call it science, and then an archaeologist is like, well, the scientist said this, it's not the same thing as like proving gravity. It's not like, it's still an interpretation. It's heavily affected by your biases, your cultural biases, your personal biases, the biases of the field, even the selection of certain things, which is going to be a bias that's going to affect anything, even if it's actual hard science. So that's why, like, it's not, the proof that they have is still interpretation. Like that site, the first site that Flint shared. The way that it's shown that this was created by humans is through an interpretation of the of this hunting wall and its structure, and that's supported by science. But that interpretation itself is not science. Whereas, Flint talking about it was just a lie and incorrect. But yes, thank you so much for that donation of the dollary dues. I'm going to assume that's Australian. And I always refer to Australian dollars as dollary dues. Also, Australia being relevant, I do love my I've been wombat posting. If you're following me on Twitter, I'm just posting pictures of wombats. I had some drinks last night on the airplane, and I was wombat posting. But yes, back to Flint Dibble. Thank you so much for
coming and pumping their money into the Egyptian tourism industry, thanks to the pyramids.
All they say is a big lie. It's imagination. It's a dream. Let them to live in dream. The people who talk about this, actually, some of them, they're doing it as business, and some of them are idiots. Every day, one email of people insulting me. They think that I hide all the evidence about lost civilization. But you have to know, if there is anything bad in Egypt, this New Age people, they come. They don't care.
So why exactly would Zahi Hawass want to ban Graham Hancock from filming there? I mean, Graham is like one of the people in the world most likely.
Oh, Robert Bauval. Yeah, see, is that who he was talking about? I don't even know who Robert Bauval
to draw in more pyramidians, more New Agers. He's got no problem renting out the pyramid to other people to meditate in. So why can't Graham come and film in the place?
Well, I think they've since squashed this beef, by the way, as far as I know. I'm not sure though. Maybe I'm wrong on that because this video is 3 weeks ago.
Let Graham explain what the problem is.
Oh, the Orion
ever since then,
correlation
my relationship with him, which had been okay until 2015, has been extremely negative. And when the Egyptian government are approached for filming permission, which these days is done through the Tourism and Antiquities Permission, when they're approached for filming permission, Zahi's the guy they go to.
So Zahi Hawass banned Graham Hancock from filming in Egypt, not because he's opposed to the words that Graham says, but because Graham challenged his ego. Lots of people come in there and have the same kind of narrative that Graham does, and Zahi is happy to take their money all day long. But Graham somehow managed to get under his skin, and he paid for it.
That's the first line of defense against a critic or an alternative point of view, is simply to deny them access to the site. And I felt since that happened that I've had my left arm cut off, because really Egypt has been very central and very important to my work.
Now, as you can see, this is pretty frustrating for Graham. And as most of you are aware, this isn't the only time that happened just during Ancient Apocalypse. He was also banned from filming at Serpent Mound. Now, the indigenous tribes blocked him there. And I'm not saying the tribes have no autonomy. Obviously, they have the ability to call these shots. But little speculation here, I'm pretty certain that there's a handful of archaeologists that decided to contact the tribes and quote-unquote inform them of the narrative that Graham Hancock espouses, and, paint it in their own little light so they can make it all ugly and whatnot. Again, that's speculation there, but at any rate, the kind of things that the tribe said in those letters are the exact kind of things that we see from a handful of archaeologists, and they were saying that stuff a good 10 years before we see any of the tribal bodies saying it. So, again, speculation, but I'm of the opinion that archaeologists press that button too. That's not the only time we see things like this, though. And you have to wonder, why would they scorch the earth like this? What is such a big deal? Like, oh my God, so many Americans believe in Atlantis. Honestly, what is the big deal about that? It's like they conflate it with other things. They conflate it with all other kinds of science denialism or whatever you want to say. But it's like, you have to understand, guys, archaeology has like a lot of speculation and personal stuff injected into it. You guess.
Smeagol, you got to watch on YouTube.
So you don't get to just be like,
people
this is the same as a freaking physicist. It's not even close to the same. Some of your data is hard, some of it is speculative. I've discussed this numerous times, so I'm not going to go into too much detail here, but I think it's very important. However, that doesn't stop them from safeguarding their narratives. As a matter of fact, that might be why they have their egos invested into these narratives, because see the way they treat other people. For example, Jimmy Corsetti, now you could call him a firebrand if you like, right? He does piss some people off.
Love Jimmy.
But the way that they tried to shut down his stuff that he said about Göbekli Tepe is nothing short of disgusting.
And it turns out that the video I made where I raised questions involving the progress of excavations, or lack thereof, created a firestorm among the powers that be within Turkey, and it turns out that they are very upset. In fact, the director of excavations of Göbekli Tepe has called for me to be sanctioned, essentially banned from the site itself, or potentially the entire country of Turkey. Now, let me start off by discussing the person who is advocating for me to be sanctioned. The director of excavations at Göbekli Tepe is a man by the name of Dr. Necmi Karul, who is a high-level professor within Turkey and is the head of prehistory at Istanbul University. And as I've been told, he has strong political connections. In fact, he is the literal boss of dozens of archaeological excavations throughout Turkey.
And again, Jimmy does say things that are inflammatory, and I understand certain people don't like him. But a lot of people really like him. His opinions are very popular. So when he asks a question and he's met with, fuck you, you're not allowed to ever come here again, that plays right into the whole archaeologists hide data from the public narrative, first of all. when Jimmy says, I wonder why they do this kind of thing, you guys just throw gas on that fire and just do not care, which that part's pretty freaking hilarious.
Various members of the WEF have seemingly infiltrated positions that ultimately control literally the world's 2 oldest archaeological sites on Earth. And the million-dollar question is why? And just as importantly to ask, why would excavations of these 2 profoundly important ancient sites be deferred to future generations? Especially at
the arguments about this on Twitter with archaeologists are so hilarious because they're like trying to justify these unjustifiable things, like these, like an orchard being planted over to, oh, it stops the erosion. Like it's like a 4,000, it's more than 4,000 years old, I think, site. Yeah, it's like 12,000 years old, something like that. It's like the grass was fine for that, and then the roots might hurt the site. Like the roots of olive trees can go down more than a meter. I guess a meter is like almost standard, or that's the lowest one that I saw. Yeah, the drama is petty. Like I just want to be talking about this stuff, man. I don't, all of this like backstabbing and nefarious actions and lies. It's not fun. It's not like I do this because I love the information. It wears on me at certain points. It really does. That's why I stopped talking about it for a while.
Where there are literally over 100 T-pillars that remain buried in the earth.
But the archaeologist that's targeting Jim, Nekmi Karul, it actually makes sense that he would go this far with something like this. I mean, look how he treats his own colleagues.
And by the way, he apparently has a hot temper, as he was sentenced to 5 months in prison for threatening to violently attack another archaeologist, saying...
That's actually kind of base, though. Like, that's pretty cool. Makes me like him a little bit more. That's sweet. I'm mostly kidding, but like, I wish, it's not. No, that's not cool. You shouldn't threaten to physically hurt somebody. I don't agree with that. But like the fact that he did that is like, our archaeologists they're not like that anymore. They're not cool. They're not like, maybe not like, you guys get what I'm saying, right? Like, it's like, I want a little piece of that. I want a little piece of that fire, and not in like like the cowardly, like almost feminine way that people like Flint Dibble do it. I want like, like 19th century stuff. Like archaeologists, like the beginning archaeologists, they would like go out in the rainforest and they would almost, like, some of them would die doing this for this stuff. They were heavily committed, and there's guys like Thor Heyerdahl, is that how you say it? Who like went out there on a raft of balsa wood in like the 1950, the year. Zeal is the right word. Thank you, Jacob. Zeal. I don't want physical violence between archaeologists. I don't like that. You're not that guy, pal. Yeah, zeal is the good word, man. That's a good word. I want a little fire in these people. One of my favorites, who I've gotten crap from archaeologists for liking this this canceled. He was canceled before cancellation was a thing. It was like he talked about he was the Yanomami archaeologist who talked about violence in Yanomami culture. I'm going to do some stuff on him in the future. I have too many projects on the back burner right now. I'm just going to look his name up. And this guy, Chagnon, Napoleon Chagnon, like, dude, the pictures that guy takes are great. And like, and that guy's like, he was like a right wing guy, or at least coded as right wing. And then there's like, but that's not like, I love archaeologists and anthropologists across the political spectrum. Napoleon Chagnon, an anthropologist, just like David Graeber, who I've talked about a lot before. He's one of my favorite anthropologists. And he was explicitly left-wing, not in a coded way, but like he was the head anthropologist behind the, like he was heavily involved in Occupy Wall Street. He got ran out of the country, man. And that's what I want to do, a video where I do like the two canceled anthropologists, right? Like you got the left-wing guy and the right-wing guy, both canceled. Both two of my favorite anthropologists. If you've been listening for a long time, you've seen me talk about Graeber's books. They're really good. And like, man, just sucks.
That he will beat him severely. Yeah.
Now, as I mentioned, I
Beat
too have
you
been
severely.
targeted by this sort of attempts to silence people. There's a video here if you care to see the whole thing, but in a nutshell, what happened was I criticized Flint Dibble for the mistruths that he spread to millions of people during the Joe Rogan debate, and he's decided that these criticisms amount to harassment. And therefore, he's threatened to...
Flint Dibble has accused me of being a stalker for commenting about the stuff that he says. It's like, dude, it's a public platform, man. Like, I'm not stalking you. I don't know where you live. I know you live somewhere in the UK. I'm not trying to find out where you live. I'm not stalking you, Flint. It's not even about you. It's about, like, it would be the same if it were anyone else that had went on Joe Rogan. You went on the biggest platform in the world, brother. What do you expect? People are going to talk about it.
Report me to YouTube. Maybe he already did. I don't really know. But he's made a few threats like that, and basically just... I don't really think that the threats have any teeth because I haven't done anything that actually amounts to harassment. I do the same stuff to him that he does to Graham, except for on an even lighter scale.
Yeah,
I pick specific things and I talk about them, and I don't just keep hammering at them over and over again unless it comes up once again like we are here. And anyway, fact of the matter is, he's one more archaeologist that gets emotional and uses underhanded means to silence critics or to attempt to silence their critics. As you'll see, this is becoming quite the theme. The next two examples that I'll give you, as a matter of fact, the first one is something that longtime viewers are probably aware of. Many of you won't be aware of. It's going to blow your mind. The one after that, it'll show you just how far outside of this whole mess they're willing to target people. They don't care what kind of person it is that they're targeting. The Clovis First debacle is pretty much the stereotypical example of archaeologists just being stubborn and not taking on board new evidence for a long time and getting pretty ugly about it. It wasn't just the slowness to take on new evidence that is criticized here, which you'll see that archaeologists kind of always try to boil it down to that, but the way that many archaeologists acted during this was downright deplorable. And that is an important thing worth mentioning. Very quickly, Clovis First is the theory that humans first arrived in the Americas around 20,000 years ago via the Bering Land Bridge. When sites started to show up that were pushing the dates back to 30,000 years or so, these were met with extreme opposition from the scientists who believed that this was impossible because Clovis First was the only narrative they would accept. They had their egos invested into it, you could probably guess. A few careers were kind of curtailed. Some would say ruined, some would say damaged, others would say nothing happened at all. At the end of the day, a man named Tom Dillehay was at the site Monteverde, and this site was basically the watershed moment. It was when some scientists, some archaeologists went. Dillehay presented them with some evidence, and they finally were like, well, shit, okay, we ain't going to win this one. Now, Monteverde was down in Chile, and Tom Dillehay, along the way, boy, oh boy, did he face some BS.
But
oh, God. Yeah, if you haven't seen this one, guys, this is a big one. Pay attention. Also, like my video, please, and subscribe if you're not. We got more coming. And I gotta edit the video down. But I did an interview with a Ojibwe man, Native American dude, Bugs Mitchell, who is active on Twitter as well. Really cool guy. I think you guys are gonna love it. Back on that cultural anthropology stuff and not all this archaeology. I hope you guys still enjoy this type of stuff, but it's not what I traditionally do, right? But yeah, thank you all for joining me.
Some of the North American colleagues were very difficult to deal with, and I think at times presenting a very unhealthy atmosphere, cutting us off before we could present the data at meetings. Not talking with us about it, refusing to even look at the data, this sort of thing. And plus, politically, from time to time, there were some difficult moments. At my home institution later on, when I left Chile, a letter was sent to a dean with anonymous signatures of about 24, 25 people saying this guy doesn't even have a PhD, a lie, of course. You should fire him from the university for what he's doing, and so on. And another colleague who sent a letter to the newspaper in Chile, one of the major newspapers, saying that
okay, I'm just going to back this up. Okay, so a colleague, when he was there in Chile during Pinochet's regime, regime, whatever. So Pinochet, a dictator, is in charge. I know we got some Pinochet fans here, whatever, but just listen to this.
From the university for what he's doing, and so on. And another colleague who sent a letter to the newspaper in Chile, one of the major newspapers saying that Monteverdi was creation of the CIA to implant me down there. And, you know, that.
So while this guy, Dillehay, he was, presumably an archaeologist, sent a letter to a newspaper in Chile, major newspaper, saying that he was a CIA asset embedded in their country. Could have got him killed. Like that's the level of stuff they deal with.
Puts you and your family in a dangerous situation in a country like that at that time. So there were several other unpleasant things. So the whole sociology of the non-scientific part of that enterprise was disturbing at times, and made me reveal that there's a small, not a majority, but a minority of people who will do anything.
And that's also, look, that's important because this guy is an anthropologist, right? The way that Flint acts and the way that the way they acted towards Tom Dillehay, but the way that they act towards people outside of their field, they act in often similar ways to each other, often behind closed doors. It's very, very cutthroat in academia. It's one of the reasons why I didn't go into it. It almost would have been a natural thing for me, but there's other reasons, of course. But like they're cutthroat with each other, with the type of stuff that they do.
And their power to defend their paradigm.
Now, for those unaware, Pinochet was a dictator.
Smeagol, I think this guy was just, I think it was like just pre-Clovis first stuff, I think, if I remember correctly. Someone correct me if I'm wrong here. Sounds like commie foolery to me. It might be, yeah.
And the disappeared people he perceived as a threat. So when Dillahay's colleague contacted them down there in Chile and said, hey, this guy's CIA, they were trying to get him potentially offed and his family just so that they could safeguard a narrative about rocks and sticks and bones in the ground. No, man, it's because of their ego, because they have a personal investment into this and they're willing to do whatever it takes to defend that, to the point of doing some really horrible crap, right? And I think we could all agree that that's just messed up. But then there's another example that's just, it's not nearly as messed up, but it's weird in the regards of who it targets. Because you guys probably know Ancient Architects, a channel ran by Matt Simpson. You know, he doesn't do Atlantis or ancient high technology or any woo. He just basically like does cutting edge, up-to-date reports on news about ancient sites, like ancient whatnots, right? Ancient stuff that's cool. So you'll find a lot of archaeology on his webpage, on his YouTube channel, and it's never like really terribly outside the realms of what archaeologists would agree with. However, he does sometimes criticize specific archaeologists for very specific things, and this is what got him into trouble. In January of this year, Matt uploaded a video that he since privated, in which he discussed the intention of archaeologists to resurface Menkare's pyramid, which is the smallest of the three big pyramids on the Giza Plateau. The intention was to replace the facing stones that were originally supposed to have been on it thousands of years ago. Now, Matt was very critical of this. He pointed out that this was not a very good idea, and he was the first person to bring this to the English-speaking world. I forget if it was a Japanese or an Egyptian news site that he found it on, but he found it on a foreign site and brought it to the English-speaking world, and it caused quite an outcry. A lot of people spoke out about how messed up this was. This was something they did not want to see happen. And one of the people that was involved, archaeologist Dr. Sakuji Yoshimura, he was not happy with this, it seems. He was one of the main people who had their names on it. And now, he didn't say anything to Matt at the time, and basically, I made a video on it just a couple days after Matt did, and by the time I uploaded my video, it was already almost over. Just like the next day, they were like, okay, yeah, problem solved, we're not going to do this anymore. Too many people are pissed off about it. But that seems to have rubbed Dr. Yoshimura the wrong way, because Matt reported on some finds of his in the near future, just some mundane cool stuff, right? There's some unknown stuff that was found, some unknown chambers that were found near the base of Menkare's pyramid. I'll let Matt explain what happened.
3 months ago, the Ancient Architects channel received a copyright strike from archaeologist Dr. Sakuji Yoshimura. for a video titled Giza Underground Anomaly Discovered Next to the Great Pyramid. Obviously, I was a bit shocked, because I believed I'd used everything within the fair use parameters. Everything was used in the correct context. It was just a video promoting a new discovery, and I provided all the source links in the description. Dr. Yoshimura said I did two things that were wrong. Number one, I used some short video clips and also a couple of stills from his Instagram page, most of which had been up and were public for weeks before I made the video. Number two, I used images and diagrams from a paper that was published, and it was already in the public domain.
What?
The same images were being used by the world's media.
I don't think wait. This probably doesn't matter, but I don't think open access means public domain, but it does mean that it's out there for free. It's not like he had to pay to access it and then share it. Like, it's not pirating.
Quote, the copyright notice in this thesis prohibits commercial use and modification of the copyrighted work. End quote.
Now, Matt is very careful to separate these two events. He doesn't claim that Dr. Yoshimura abused the copyright system in order to take his video down out of anger because of the shitstorm that Matt started talking about the Menkaure's pyramid refacing debacle. But to me, it seems quite clear that that's what it is, because nothing in Matt's other video was bad or mean or any of it. It was just like, hey, check it out, look what this guy found. And he just shows some clips and shows some images, and that's all there is to it. Now, to be fair, in Japan there is no fair use, so it's possible that Dr. Yoshimura just doesn't understand that this is, but I find that kind of hard to believe. Let's be honest. I mean, the man's an educated dude, right? He knew that this was a slap. And it again, Matt's coverage was fair and balanced. It wasn't like he was being critical of the man at all. But he had been critical of the man. And the man got his feet burnt by it. So I'm of the opinion that this is still the same kind of thing. And even if it's not, the fact of the matter is Dr. Yoshimura is coming after him with copyright strikes instead of just emailing him, which I am quite certain. I know Matt well enough to know that I'm quite certain he would say, dude, okay, if you want me to take the video down, bro, I'll take it down, no problem. I don't want to fight with you about this shit. But he didn't. He just abuses the copyright system, just does things that most of us would recognize as underhanded and just shitty. Emotional to protect his ego. That last part's speculation on my part. It's not necessarily factual. Disclaimers abound. This type of behavior is just unacceptable, period. Threatening to turn people in for harassment when they're not harassing you. Abusing YouTube's copyright system. Banning people from filming places when you let anybody else with the same thinking that they have show up there and film to their heart's content. Or, God forbid, telling dictators that this person is a spy. All of these things are pretty deplorable, although, of course, one of these is a little worse than the rest. But the bottom line is, I think we all recognize that these are the actions of people that are like, socially, there's something not, the rest of us get this is BS, okay? Most people understand this is not how you handle this stuff. So I don't think the thing to do here is to like try to grill these people over it, because they don't get it. They feel like they are in the right. So in my opinion, the best way to handle this is just to spread the word across the internet at large. Just let social media figure out that archaeologists like to do this kind of crap. Even recently, just targeting in the last little bit, targeting 3 people with this kind of stuff in our community just because they feel offended. I think this is something that we should get the word out about. So like, you can share my video, you can share any of the videos where any of the other people talked about their personal experiences too. The links are all in the description. And get the word out about this stuff. Go to your freaking commentary YouTubers and hang out in their freaking live streams if you're up to that sort of thing or down to do it. And post the links to the stuff there. Let them know what's going on. Tell them the story, because this is the kind of thing that I know certain people would cover, and it is the kind of thing that apparently it needs.
Okay. I'm going to take a little break here. Just a few minutes. I'm going to go to the bathroom, grab some more waters. And then I'll be back. We're going to do a little bit more. You guys, if you've been here a while, you probably know. Ooh, I know which one we're going to do next. I know exactly what we're going to put up right now. I agree, Shermanator. Yeah. Can anyone guess what I'm about to play? Can anyone guess? That's right. All right, hydrate. Bathroom. Crab rave, Smeagol. I don't know how you don't know what it is. No. Crab rave. Okay, crab rave over. One of these days, I'm just going to do a stream where I just leave crab rave on until one of these archaeologists will talk to me about the evidence. Will talk to me about my own videos. No one wants to defend it. No one wants to tell me why I'm wrong on what Flint Dibble brought up. But he is wrong. He's wrong about a number of things, a number of consequential things. Freaking mosquito. Okay.
Archaeology is...
where did I get my degree? Well, God, I'm talking about this a lot now. I have 3 degrees. I have 2 bachelor's degrees, one of them being a double from the University of Connecticut. History, anthropology, and education. Yeah, it is nice to have notes on hand before you have any kind of talk or debate, and Dibble had that, and yet he was still lying. But whatever. Let's go.
Is very
Oh, this one is Clovis first.
keen on new ideas and wants to really explore and investigate the past. Is that right?
That's my perspective. Yeah.
That's your perspective.
That's my
All right.
perspective.
Let's have a look at Clovis first.
Clovis first. Something people skeptical of scientists love to bring up and something scientists love to play down. Let's go ahead and talk about the implications of this bad boy here. Hi, my name is Dan and welcome to Dedunking. You know what? Right off the bat, I'm going to disagree with Graham. Since everybody's like, oh, you guys are talking now, that means you're never again going to criticize him and you're just going to change and no longer be in the middle and stuff. I'm going to point out where I think Graham went wrong right off the bat because I haven't been doing that the last few videos for reasons I've already mentioned. One of the places that I think Graham definitely made a misstep is when he was trying to prove that the Clovis first debate was kind of still going now or had been in very recent times.
Yeah, I think Graham was a little wrong about that.
Were like,
it actually is. There's a few holdouts, but they're people don't take that seriously anymore. Most people don't.
The Guardian and stuff like that weren't really scientific papers.
And so you mentioned this Clovis first hypothesis.
Oh, here's the Kelp Highway hypothesis. This is so funny because I talked about this earlier. I don't know how many people are still here from 2.5 hours ago, but near the beginning of the stream, we talked about Flint Dibble talking about how there's no evidence of ships from the time from like older than 7,000 years ago in which Flint misidentified canoes from a lake with shipwrecks, which is wrong for a number of reasons because they're canoes. They weren't shipwrecks. They were probably just placed there for storage. They're in a freshwater lake, easier to find, better preservation, easier to excavate, all of these sorts of things. And then he brings up the Kelp Highway hypothesis, but the Kelp Highway hypothesis is a hypothesis that builds on the idea of, which is well supported in the archaeological record in these arguments in a number of different ways from many different places. We just were watching a video from Dedunking earlier where there was evidence I didn't know about of other ships, but there's plenty of evidence of seafaring in Melanesia going back 50,000 years. There's a bunch of it, and none of it has any watercraft. The Kelp Highway hypothesis requires boats. It's part of the theory, and yet he doesn't require them Flint doesn't require them to have boats for that somehow, because they wouldn't survive. Everybody knows that, besides Flint, I guess.
Is this right? Mm-hmm. It's been decades. You bring up news articles and headlines that say that it's still being debunked. That's not what archaeology is. Our articles ourselves don't say that. Our articles instead...
Okay, but there are some people that are still putting out articles like that. That is a fact. There are anthropologists who still do that. Bug, what do you ask this for? No, just bachelor's degrees. But I don't like a bachelor's degree. Number one, illegitimate scholar, perfectly okay to not have a degree to talk about this stuff. But also, a bachelor's degree is sufficient in order to talk about scholarly papers. Like you can interpret a scholarly paper just fine, even if you don't have one. But like that's the intention of a bachelor's degree. Yeah, and what a lot of people don't know about PhDs is that PhDs are extraordinarily pointed research in one specific topic. So Flint Dibble he's an archaeologist, yeah, but he is a food archaeologist. It's got nothing to do with maritime archaeology.
Present new hypotheses like the Kelp Highway hypothesis, because scholars do not write the headlines for media articles. I cannot help how journalists portray what we do, okay?
So if Graham wants to demonstrate the debate did or didn't end at a certain point, he should be using peer-reviewed published papers, in my opinion. Certainly not just like mainstream journal-y articles, because those could be, written by anyone, and even an unpublished thing written by an archaeologist. I mean, you could have some guy who was 95 years old and still stuck in his ways from the Clovis first days. So, in my opinion, in order to be demonstrably 100%, you should be using peer-reviewed published papers from modern times. Now, for those of you who haven't unsubscribed from me yet, now's the time. And for those of you who unsubscribed from me 2 videos ago, now you're like, oh man, he still does criticize Graham. Oh shit, what did I do wrong? So let's carry on with the rest of the video and discuss Clovis first. The basics of the Clovis first hypothesis goes as follows. 2 great ice sheets, the Laurentide and the Cordilleran, covered the majority of the North American continent for eons. And around 13,000 years ago, they begin to melt, leaving a corridor across an exposed Bering land bridge. Because the sea levels were so much lower, being that all this water was locked up in the ice sheets, there was a fat strip of turf between Asia and America, and this was believed to have been used by the very first inhabitants of the Americas. As there were, and still are, numerous Clovis points for dating around that time period, the belief was...
Many such cases, many such cases. I think, PhDs, they get great research in that one specific area, but I was talking earlier about why I didn't go into academia. This is another reason. I do not like going that deep. I would... Talking, a lot of anthropology PhDs are like 9 years long. They take a long time, longer than other PhDs in a lot of cases. That's my nightmare, is just talking about one thing for that long. I would not want to do that at all. But yeah, that's... I've seen it. I've seen that firsthand.
Because the Clovis people were the very first Americans.
Clovis... like the stream, press the little thing. It helps me out a lot. Like it or Flint Dibble wins.
Points are a unique style of arrow or spear point, and this was used to loosely connect the people across a continent under the umbrella term the Clovis culture. Because the weapon points showed up in the appropriate time to line up with the melting of those ice sheets, this hypothesis looked really good. Two different lines of evidence seem to point to the very first human feet touching the Americas around 12 to 13,000 years ago, and this became the orthodox position for decades, at least for 50 years. And this was pretty much fine until French-Canadian archaeologist Jacques Cinq-Mars showed up in the late 70s at the Bluefish Caves in the Yukon. And when he excavated the place, he found what he was pretty certain were signs of human butchering on mammoth bones. And the dating on the place was around 24,000 years ago. This basically doubled the age of the peopling of the Americas.
It's a long time ago.
And he wasn't shy about it. He had no problem putting this information out into the world. And it was, well, famously or infamously, it was not met with kindness by his colleagues. Science journalist and trained archaeologist Heather Pringle studied under Jacques Cinq-Mars, and in an article on the opposition Cinq-Mars faced surrounding the Bluefish Caves, she says, "But relatively few of Cinq-Mars's peers shared his confidence. And as I began regularly attending archaeological conferences in the years following that trip to the Bluefish Caves, I saw what Cinq-Mars was up against. Sitting in halls with Canadian and American researchers, I witnessed what happened when archaeologists presented data that contradicted the Clovis first model. Often a polite bemusement spread through the room, as if the audience was dealing with some crackpot uncle.
Ridiculous.
Or the atmosphere grew tense.
It reminds me of that scene in it's Disney, right? The animated movie Atlantis, where he goes in and they're all laughing at him. Love that movie. I might watch that tonight.
Intense as someone began grilling the presenter. But once or twice, the mask of professional respect slipped completely. I heard laughter and snickering in the room. She was there. She saw firsthand what he faced, and I think it's important to pay attention to what she says here. Because she doesn't say that all the archaeologists on the planet oppose Cinq-Mars, but she does say that he faced a hegemony of ideas, basically, that he faced an uphill battle trying to get his ideas out into the public, and that it ended up damaging his career. It ended up damaging, most likely, his mental health, although she doesn't say that directly. It's pretty obviously implied from the words that are used there. Now, Flint, he's going to downplay this.
That suggests there's an archaeological conspiracy where we're all working together to have one narrative.
No, it suggests that there's a strongly held point of view, there's a paradigm, and that those who go against the paradigm are likely to be attacked, like Tom Dillehay, like Jacques Cinq-Mars.
All of them still had successful careers for many decades.
But
Jacques Cinq-Mars excavated many other sites.
Right,
but compare that to what Heather Pringle says in her article. It was a brutal experience, something that Cinq-Mars once likened to the Spanish Inquisition. At conferences, audiences paid little heed to his presentations, giving short shrift to the evidence. Other researchers listened politely, then questioned his competence. The result was always the same. When Jacques proposed that the Bluefish Caves was 24,000 years old, it was not accepted, said William Josie, director of the Natural Resources of the Venut-Gwich'in First Nations in Old Crow. In his office at the Canadian Museum of History, Cinq-Mars turned at the wall of closed minds. Funding for his bluefish work grew scarce. His field work eventually sputtered and died. He enjoyed his summers excavating and exploring the Yukon, trying to find exactly areas like the Bluefish Caves, but his, funding and ability to do so just slowly withered over the years. And he's not the only guy that experienced such a thing. The guy that Graham Hancock showed.
There's something very important here, right? It's like, this is the practicality of dissenting from the mainstream opinion in archaeology or in any academic setting, is that you can lose whether you're right or wrong. And in this case, he was very right, and it's now accepted. Even if you're right, you can lose access to the ability to lose your job. You can lose funding. You can, even if you're someone like Dan here, Dedunking. Why am I not subscribed to Dedunking? Huh, that's weird. That's odd. I'm on my main account. Maybe I should have already been subscribed. Whatever. Yeah, but subscribe to me and like my video too, and also Dan's as well. I'm doing this with his permission, by the way. Not that I would need it for fair use, but you know, I do have it. Yeah, like the video, I lost my train of thought.
Showed in the debate, Tom Dillehay, he experienced very, very similar things.
A lot of things happened during that span of 20 years before things changed.
The same video we watched before.
Can you tell me what your thoughts are in terms of scientific process?
Okay, different part.
Considering what took place in terms of the dialogue and all the back and forth that happened, is that what you would have expected from the scientific process?
Well, yes and no. I put together an interdisciplinary research team of people, got National Geographic funding and National Science Foundation funding.
That audio was this video, not me, by the way. That
went pretty well the way we expected it to, and I found that the scientists were open-minded. This includes archaeologists. We had Australian, Chilean, and Argentinian archaeologists working with us. Cumulatively speaking, those people, besides myself, probably had close to 100 years of experience amongst them. What surprised me on the other side of the coin was the stiff closed-mindedness of many North American archaeologists. There were some North American archaeologists, particularly those who worked in Latin America, Alan Bryan, Ruth Gruen, a few others, open-minded. Of course, Montebear, they sort of fit the paradigm they were expecting. But I found Europeans much more open-minded. But some of the North American colleagues were very difficult to deal with.
He's so nice when he calls them colleagues. He even called the guy that tried to get him, get him thrown out of a helicopter for being accused of being a CIA asset, his own colleague, which is wild.
And I think at times presenting a very unhealthy atmosphere, cutting us off before we could present the data at meetings. Not talking with us about it, refusing to even look at the data, this sort of thing.
Now here it's pretty clear, he faced a lot of opposition when he went public, but he's also clear it wasn't everyone, it was a very select, specific group of archaeologists that opposed him. Now I know that me and Graham are in contact now, so it's expected that I never disagree with him on anything, but I have to say I think that Graham misses the significance of this. The distinction between who is involved with the gatekeeping and who isn't is actually very important in my mind. While it's clear that the people who are most directly connected to the Clovis First model, mostly North American archaeologists, were unscientific in their treatment of the site, North American archaeologists who were working in South America were not opposed to the findings out of hand. In fact, as Dillehay puts it,
there were some North American archaeologists, particularly those who worked in Latin America, Alan Bryan, Ruth Gruen, a few others, open-minded. Of course, Montebear, they sort of fit the paradigm they were expecting.
Basically, it's the same old, same old. A few bad apples are ruining it for everyone. Now, Flint's going to say, oh, it's not really that bad, it doesn't really ruin much. And Graham's going to attribute it to more archaeologists and, in my opinion, should be deemed guilty of this crime, although I can completely understand why, because now check it out. He gets a letter, he sees the letter, the SAA letter, for example, to Netflix. And it's from the Society of American Archaeology, and it's got effing United States government letterhead, SAA at 5,000 members strong. It makes it come across that 5,000 people think this should be the thing. And when nobody really speaks up in opposition that has an SAA letterhead themselves, it's pretty easy for him to at least lump those 5,000 into the group that think that he should write off. And so you can't really blame him when he gets a little bit emotional about it, although I will say that doesn't help a whole lot when you're having the debate. especially the debate on Joe Rogan, because like I mentioned before, Flint could bait that. He could straight up be like, poke the bear, poke the bear. I know you're mad. I know you're mad. I know you're mad. You go into the debate, emotions come out. And I'm like, well, what's the deal, man? I didn't say anything. And the people that weren't aware of all that shit that happened before, they didn't see it happen in the debate. They saw Graham bring it up in the debate. So they can be like, oh, you're the one that's making this a big deal. But it's like, man, anybody who's in the know knows a lot different. So I see where Graham has a problem here. But it is certainly not all archaeologists. It's just a handful. For example, Thomas F. Lynch wrote papers debunking the idea that Ice Age humans existed in South America, and Dillehay wrote papers in response. And this is all back in the 90s about Monteverde and sites similar to that. I'll link one of the papers below. After that, you can sign into View, and it's free, and it doesn't require anything but a Gmail account. And then others are going to show up next to the articles. You can see all the responses these guys had next to each other and other scientists weighing in. And it's an old debate, but it's very much worth reading, because we'll see quotes like this from Dillehay. A recent review by Lynch of late Pleistocene sites in South America is impaired by numerous errors.
This is a really good comparison you made here. It's like 10 cops standing around watching one cop beat someone in handcuffs and not doing anything about it. They're all bad cops. If none of the 5,000 step in to say otherwise, well, yeah, you're right. Especially when it's an organization that you are a part of, like essentially they're speaking for you at that point. I don't know like what the level of involvement is with people in this, but it means something.
And misrepresentations. Now, if you've watched my other videos on the debate, I don't really need to explain this parallel to you. You've already seen it. Flint has kind of consistently misrepresented things and misunderstood where Hancock is coming from. And that puts Graham in a position where he does feel justified in just like railing against archaeology in general. Although, again, I will say that I don't think that that's the answer or a healthy path forward. Although I do get why he feels the way he does.
In a certain way, these other archaeologists are prisoners, though, right? Like, you can't expect them to just nuke their entire career for this, which is what they might have to do, just based on... And you guys have all seen it. You've seen the way that they respond to disagreement and stuff like this. If somebody in the club a little bit does this, they're gonna have some very real consequences for it.
Because let's be clear, when Ancient Apocalypse is review bombed before it's been up for a day, it's clearly an attack on his work and his ability to publicly express that work. This has created quite the Hatfield and McCoy scenario, although in this case we can safely say archaeologists fired the first shots. Just read Fingerprints of the Gods. It doesn't have the combative tone against archaeologists that Ancient Apocalypse does. But back in the 90s, nobody had called Hancock a racist. Nobody was trying to deplatform him. Nobody had conflated his work with things like...
They're saying that I embolden extreme voices that misrepresent archaeological knowledge.
You can hear the pain in his voice, honestly. Graham is an incredibly nice guy. And I'm not as nice as Graham. I'm not as willing to... not that it's wrong to be nice, but, he was more willing to be forgiving towards Flint. He was more willing to let this stuff go. And then Flint continued to double down. And I believe that Graham has changed his tune a little bit about that. And, for good reason, as Flint continues to claim that, he continues to defend these ideas, continues to attack Graham as some sort of racist. It's ridiculous.
In order to spread false historical narratives that are overtly misogynistic, chauvinistic, racist, and anti-Semitic. I mean, you apply those labels to somebody and you're going to get that person hated.
The point is, I see why Graham thinks the SAA and its 5,000 members are like part of the problem. I've said similar things, even though I was mostly saying it to piss people off, because in reality, I recognize there's a lot of SAA members who really don't have a dog in that fight. Although I will point out that if you're a member of a group that's saying stupid shit like this and you let it run amok, you are letting them sully your group, and then guys like me come along and pick at it. But that's getting off a little bit into the weeds. This whole mess got really bad. It bled into like actually endangering Dillahay's life when you look at the Clovis First thing. I mean, by this whole mess. Like, check this out.
And plus, politically, from time to time, there were some difficult moments. At my home institution later on, when I left Chile, a letter was sent to a dean with anonymous signatures of about 24, 25 people saying this guy doesn't even have a PhD, a lie, of course. You should fire him from the university for what he's doing, and so on. And another colleague who sent a letter to the newspaper in Chile, one of the major newspapers, saying that Monteverdi was creation of the CIA to plant me down there.
So if you weren't here earlier when we covered this, that was in another video, an archaeologist tried to he sent a letter to a newspaper telling them that this archaeologist was a member of the CIA, a CIA asset during the reign of Pinochet, the dictator. Like, that very well could have gotten him and his life and his family's lives gone. Like, this is no joke here. That's chilling. It's scary. Yeah.
And, that puts you and your family in a dangerous situation in a country like that at that time. So there were several other unpleasant things. So the whole sociology of the non-scientific part of that enterprise was disturbing at times, and made me reveal that there's a small, not a majority, but a minority of people who will do anything in their power to defend their paradigm. It was their career, and they had given decades to it. I can see that from a historical viewpoint now, as the years go by, but on the other hand, I certainly didn't accept it at the time.
I mean, actual fear for him and his family over this debate. Decades before social media even, he was attacked for opposing the Clovis Mafia academically and socially, with the social attacks actually having a good possibility of becoming physical. But history shows us the bad actors are just a few people, a vocal minority, something that those of us who spend some time on social media, we've seen how these guys can paint out a group with just a couple of nutters being the public face of it. But in this case, this is the same kind of hegemony actually existed before Clovis first, and is the same kind of scenario in the Americas, in the debate around the peopling of the Americas. And basically, one guy and his buddy, and then a handful of their cohorts, held the hegemony into place and kept the peopling of the Americas dating back to about 3,000 years ago, maybe 4,000 years ago if you got crazy. And that was the limit. Ailes Hadrilica, who totally never got made fun of in school for his last name, was an anthropologist in the first half of the 20th century. And he was firmly of the opinion that the site of Folsom, New Mexico was a hoax, because the evidence said the site was about 10,000 years old, and Hadrilica believed there was no way people were in the Americas that far back in time. And as he was the head of the Smithsonian Institute's Physical Anthropology Division, he was well positioned to block finds from being accepted as legitimate. It took a very long time, but eventually the Folsom site was accepted, and Folsom Man became, for a time, the first human in the Americas. But before that, if you wanted to be an archaeologist in North America, you couldn't posit the peopling of North America before 2000 BC and be successful, or you would run amok of Hadrilica and his friends, and then they would ruin your career. And this is documented well, links below. So this dynamic isn't new, not even in regards to the debates surrounding the peopling of the Americas. And Flint is right when he points out that it's just a few assholes.
Monteverdi.
How did you feel when he was describing what was ultimately true, but was being dismissed, and he was being shut off, and people weren't willing to look at the data? How do you feel as an archaeologist?
Oh, I think that's complete. I don't mean that what Graham's saying is bullshit. I think it's complete bullshit for any colleagues of mine that try to shoot down actual evidence. That is ridiculous. I'm not trying to say that all of archaeology is like any community of people. There includes some assholes. I have worked with some assholes before.
But these assholes have a lot of power. And this
Flint, you're the asshole. You're the one. You are that. Like, that's you, dude.
This is something Graham recognizes.
Thank you.
Because
yes,
that power
right as I said it. I think you probably typed that out before I said
But Flint, he doesn't recognize it.
There's a few second
delay. Because he's one of those assholes.
Oh, gosh, we all
Take
said
the
it.
Younger Dryas impact hypothesis, or Ganong Padang. Now, both have a stark difference in opinion between the people who publish the papers and the quote-unquote mainstream academics. And both have been attacked by the Atlantis Mafia. But unlike the Clovis Mafia, here we have a group of people of different specialties. These aren't all just North American archaeologists railing against the Younger Dryas impact hypothesis. And it's not just Indonesian archaeologists attacking the Gunung Padang paper published by Dr. Dani Naduwajaja. Jawa, however you pronounce it, sorry. We have the same few people showing up in all the papers against the Younger Dryas impact hypothesis, and a different group of same people showing up in all the articles talking about the Gunung Padang paper. Flint Dibble is one of those names in the case of the Gunung Padang paper, and you might see him talking about the Younger Dryas impact hypothesis as well. He railed against the Gunung Padang paper as though it was somehow his responsibility, his expertise, or even something he was aware about before Ancient Apocalypse aired. To put it bluntly, Flint is one of the figureheads of the Atlantis Mafia, and he will bend over backwards to take down ideas that oppose his beliefs. Despite him saying,
well, think about how many people actually study the Clovis period. That is a tiny period in one area of the world. The majority of archaeologists do not study that. Even Americanist
that's
archaeologists,
completely irrelevant.
Most Americanist archaeologists study much later periods.
He himself is not concerned with his expertise or region of study. He's willing to go anywhere Hancock goes in order to prove him wrong. So for all of you who say I never criticized Graham, here's a criticism point blank. He should not have implied that archaeologists in general have created this paradigm that keeps his work from the public sphere. He should have agreed with Flint when Flint says it's just a handful of assholes that do that sort of thing. And then he should have pointed out that Flint is one of the chiefs among those assholes.
You're public enemy number one.
Yes, I am. Clearly, Flint to you, because you have, and John Hoops, for example.
God, John
from the
Hoops
University
is
of
the worst,
Kansas.
man.
I can play you some stuff from John Hoops too, if you want.
How powerful was the Balrog? That's the one that's coming up next. Okay, we got more videos.
Just how powerful is the Balrog?
Just how powerful is the Balrog? Yeah, that shows you the kind of stuff that I watch here. Okay, so we got, gosh, I watched a lot of these. Some of these I've already done. Let's do this one. Go a little bit off of this. I don't know why I'm sounding Canadian. Not a bad Canadian accent. I did not do that intentionally. What do you guys think? Thousands of years in the wild, a few generations with human intervention. Yeah. Yeah, he's wrong about that. He was clearly wrong about even his own field, food archaeology. Like my video, please. Deep Geek? What's Deep Geek? Oh, that was the video with the ball. Yeah, I've watched that guy. Yeah.
Regular contributors posted an article on his website that attacked Milo Rossi, better known as Mini Minuteman. Most of my regular viewers know who he is. His series Debunking Ancient Apocalypse, Hancock's Netflix show, is, I think, the most watched critique of Ancient Apocalypse on the internet. So it is no surprise that he is now being attacked personally by Hancock's cadre.
You know, I covered this article already, and I tried to be as fair about it as I possibly could. I mean, I'm friends with Milo, and I'm friends with Graham, and I at least wanted to know what Dr. Miano had to say on the whole thing. But after I watched Dave's video, I felt like I absolutely had to make a response. I mean, nowadays everybody tries to say that I'm part of the Hancock cadre, that I was never impartial to begin with, or that I sold my soul, or there's some whatever spin on that you want to say. But here's a great opportunity for me to show you the difference between a truly one-sided take and one that at least tries hard to be impartial. Hi, my name is Dan, and welcome to Dedunking.
Since Skinner's article refers to me numerous times, using my words to attack Mini Minuteman, and misunderstands things that I've said, I think I ought to correct the record.
Well, that makes sense. It sounds fair, right? Well, it would if it actually clarified things, but it would be a crying shame if it left the waters muddier than when we started.
In this video, I want to look specifically at Holly Lasko Skinner's argument that Milo Rossi, Mini Minuteman, is a pseudo-archaeologist. According to my definition, he isn't.
Dr. Miano has amended his definition from the previous video, the one that Holly used in her article. And for the most part, all he did was get a little bit more intricate and a little bit more detailed, so it's not really that big of a deal by and large. However, he uses a lot of different metaphors and allegories as we go forward.
Stupid term.
And as you'll notice, pseudo-archaeology gets its own special treatment. The standards have also changed since the previous video.
I made a whole video defining what pseudo-archaeology is, and if you haven't seen it yet, I recommend watching it. I made the video because I noticed there was a great deal of misunderstanding about what pseudo-archaeology is.
Now notice the reasoning Dave gives us for him making a video on the definition of pseudo-archaeology. People don't really know what it means by and large. And he's right, the term is very nebulous and ill-defined. Part of the issue is pseudo-archaeology is not a real word, it's 2 words. You go ahead and test, type it into whatever device you got there and see what autocorrect tells you to do.
I would love to know when
and check the dictionaries and see what they have
came out.
You'll notice there isn't a real consensus. It's different depending on who you ask, because there is no official definition for the non-word.
Skinner spends the first part of her article showing that Milo currently calls himself an archaeologist. Then she refers to a live stream that I did in June of 2022, in which Milo appeared, and he said this.
I don't know what to label myself as, because it make me feel like a fraud to say that I am an archaeologist when I have like a training in it. I haven't been out on a dig, so it's like I don't want to.
You have no training in it, and you haven't been on. I've even been on a dig. I've been on multiple digs. I've been on like 10. What? And I never call myself an archaeologist. What are you talking about here?
Like claim that, when in reality that title requires a lot of research and a lot of time and investment in order to say that. So I'm just like, I'm Milo. I talk about this stuff. You guys know I've been researching it. My whole life. I'm a researcher. But like I don't feel the need to like make up some title to try and make myself sound like I'm I don't know, better than I am.
So here Milo says that he doesn't feel comfortable calling himself an archaeologist. Skinner concludes that there's a contradiction. She writes, as evidenced in Chapter 1, Milo Rossi, aka Minuteman, is on record stating that he is an archaeologist.
Huh?
He is not an archaeologist because he hasn't been adequately trained. If he were to call himself an archaeologist, he'd feel like a fraud.
Wait,
Did
what?
you catch the mistake? She writes that Milo said he is not an archaeologist because he has not been adequately trained. Is that what he said? Let's play the clip again.
I have like a training in it. I haven't been out on a dig,
He said,
wait, did he say he has a training in it? What does that mean?
That it would make him feel like a fraud to say he is an archaeologist when, although he does have the training in it, he hasn't been out on a dig.
How do you, no, I'm sorry. How do you have the training in archaeology is an archaeological field school? Usually when people call themselves archaeologists, it's because they're PhD students or master's professionals that do archaeology. But like, there are archaeology techs that have the same training I have, which is an archaeology field school. I don't understand. That's the most basic level training in archaeology is an archaeology field school. It's very basic. I've done that. It's not a big deal. It's like it's a few weeks. It's like a month. It can be give or take. Like, that's crazy, dude. What is happening right now?
First major blunder.
So we have Milo saying that he isn't an archaeologist, and we have him saying that he is an archaeologist, and obviously that's pretty hard to reconcile. And when I made my previous video on this, I said as much. I also did mention that I know Milo, and I don't think that he would hold that kind of mutually exclusive position. I'm sure something's changed, or he has some other thing. Here's what I said. What the really big thing here is, Milo's own words were his biggest evidence against him, right? Milo's words and the words of guys like Hoops and Dr. Miano. This put Milo in a position basically where it's like he's calling himself a pseudo-archaeologist or a fraud or whatever, right? And this is where me knowing him makes things a little bit different for me, because I don't see those quotes so cut and dry. I know him well enough to know there's absolutely no way he's going to maintain both of those things at the same time in his head. He's not going to be like, oh yeah, I'm a fraud if I call myself an archaeologist and I'm an archaeologist. Somewhere there's a disconnect there. And I haven't reached out and asked him the opinion on that. I'm just going to, when we have the hangout, I'll talk.
You can have, I don't know if all archaeology degrees actually require you to have an archaeology field school, but as far as I know, every archaeology field school includes a dig. Like, that's what the school is. And then there's like lab portions of it and everything. So I have an anthropology degree, and part of that, I have an anthropology degree, not archaeology in North America is in North America. anthropology includes archaeology. It's not true in Europe, but an anthropology degree doesn't necessarily require you to have an archaeology field school. I think at my college, they did require you for an archaeology degree. If they even had an archaeology degree. This is so ridiculous, but like, having a degree in anthropology doesn't mean that you've been on a dig. I don't know.
Talk to him about it. I'm sure his answer.
This whole channel is anthropology.
Straightforward, pretty cut
anthropology
and dry.
and related to anthropology.
It might even just be that he didn't get to finish saying what he was saying in the hangout with Dr. Miano. I'm not 100% sure, but I feel like I'm getting a little bit of apology.
I don't really know this
Miano
guy, but I don't like the cadence of his voice.
What are you going to say about that? But seriously, I do think that if you talk to the lad a little bit, I do think that he will have an answer for this. It's not absolutely insane. Although I have to say I'm not seeing it on his face. But I do know Milo, and I don't think that this is, at the very least, he'd be like, well, shit, I probably shouldn't have said that when I was on Dr. Miano. You know, I had too many beers. That's a possibility as well.
Dude, these terms are so worthless, man. They're just
experience
identities.
and training is a mistake on Holly's part, one that I am ashamed to say I missed when I made my previous video. I don't think it changes her position a whole lot, but it absolutely is a mistake and it's worth highlighting. I wouldn't call it a major mistake, however.
I expect that since our live stream, Milo considered that there is more to being an archaeologist than simply being out on a dig, and so he changed his mind about calling himself one. I do know that when he was in field school, it was during COVID, so they had to...
Well, okay. You're okay.
Himself one. I do know that when he was in field school, it was...
So he did an archaeology field school, but it was during COVID, and they didn't go on a dig? So he was in... Did he do an online field school? Why would you not... Digs are outside, dude. They're not... You can do that.
During COVID, so they had to replace hands-on work in the field with data work.
Whoa, man. His field school was data work. Am I crazy here? Field school? Field school, data work. Which, like, field school would include data work, but, like, is that implying it was online? So he did a field school where he didn't go to the field.
It was good enough for the school, but not good enough for Skinner.
Now, Dr. Miano, let's be honest. This is you being an apologist. And to be clear, I've done the exact same thing. But when you bust out that line of argumentation, I think it's kind of really important that you just, like, say point blank, I'm being an apologist. I feel like I'm getting a little bit of apology. Some of you guys are going to start calling me a Milo Rossi apologist now instead of a Graham Hancock apologist. What are you going to say about that? But
she then makes an argument about what she thinks.
This is why these terms don't make any sense. Like, there are certain terms that are protected. Like, you can't call yourself an MD if you don't have a medical degree. You can't, like, you can call yourself a doctor even if you don't have a PhD. It's not a protected term. Like, champagne is a protected term. There's a legal definition of it, right? It's but, like, you're going to define yourself. Like, going on an archaeology field dig doesn't make you an archaeologist, even in my definition. Like, if someone told me they were an archaeologist and they said they'd been on one dig during their field school, I'd be like, oh, well, that's not, like, I don't care, because I don't put any, like, stake in these identities, which is essentially what they are. They're terms that you define yourself with. But, like, if that's how you're defining archaeologist, then okay, I'm an archaeologist, and I don't consider myself one. But all right.
A pseudo-archaeologist is. She does this by looking up the word pseudo in the dictionary. Then she extrapolates. You might wonder, if she was simply going to use the dictionary, why didn't she just look up pseudo-archaeology? It could be because she didn't like the definition. The Oxford Dictionary defines pseudo-archaeology as a broad spectrum of largely unconnected topics and approaches which misapply, misinterpret, and misrepresent archaeological material in a non-scientific and often...
Wait, that defines... But that's misapplying misapply, misinterpret, and misrepresent archaeological material in a non-scientific and often speculative way. That defines Flint Dibble. Flint Dibble is a pseudo-archaeologist. Oh crap, Flint Dibble's a pseudo-archaeologist. I mean, I've said it before, but...
and speculative way. I think that's a fine definition.
Now, this is where I had to comment when I first watched this, because as previously mentioned, the definition of pseudo-archaeology is very nebulous. Dr. Miano says he's citing the Oxford Dictionary, but he's not quite doing so. He's using the Oxford Quick Reference. It's close. It pulls this info from the Oxford Concise Archaeology Dictionary.
Oh,
but that is
so
still not
stupid.
a dictionary proper. It is a condensed reference version of a dictionary for professional archaeologists. One can hardly expect Holly...
Oh, that's different. So that's jargon. Look, words are defined in... Okay. Words are defined different ways. Like the dictionary definition of even the same word is going to believe... Like, it's going to have a different definition than a regular dictionary. Like technology, the word technology is one that I talk about a lot. The word technology is defined differently colloquially and in a dictionary than it is in anthropology. Like each field has its own definitions for words, especially something like law, where the words have like legal definitions to them that are very consequential because they have to do with whether someone might go to prison or not. Oh God, this is so dumb. It's so dumb. Oh, I just want to talk about old stuff, guys. Come on. I want to talk about old stuff and cultures.
Or anyone else for that matter, to accept this definition for a non-scientific term by its inclusion in one non-dictionary. And this would be a non-issue if Dr. Miano wasn't implying that Holly was being dishonest or somehow cultivating a narrative by not using this definition that he's calling the dictionary definition. I mean, he didn't even use that definition in his previous video. Now, I know these are a couple of years apart, but this just highlights just how vastly... Just look at these two clips here. See how different his opinion is from 2 years ago to now on what pseudo-archaeology is.
What exactly is pseudo-archaeology? Well, the literal meaning is fake archaeology. That is something that is not archaeology, which is masquerading as archaeology.
Okay, so then when Graham or Flint is calling Graham a pseudo-archaeologist, then he's not, because Graham doesn't do archaeology.
Pseudo-archaeology has nothing to do with what someone calls themselves. It's about mimicking the practice of archaeology while violating its principles and methods. And someone is a pseudo-archaeologist.
Sorry, we can get off topic for a second. No, the wooden object behind me is an Asmat shield from Papua New Guinea, which is the... Wait a minute. I gotta Google, make sure I say this correctly. It's from the... it's not from Papua New Guinea. It's from New Guinea. It's from the island of New Guinea, but it's from the part that's administered by Indonesia, and it's from the Asmat tribe from Western Papua, which is part of the country of Indonesia. Yeah, and it's like it's a legit one. It's like made by the Asmat tribe.
Archaeologist if they do this commonly.
And you'll notice it wasn't a definition, it was a meaning, was the terminology that he specifically used. But 2 years ago, that was a lot different than the thing that he said is just fine as a definition today.
The other end, you mean the wooden object on the other side? That's my that's a wooden plaque. Plaque? Is plaque the right word? It's what they gave me when I got out of the Marine Corps. It's got my medals or ribbons and stuff on it, and rank and stuff.
Literal meaning is fake archaeology. It's about mimicking the practice of archaeology.
Papua New Guinea is
violating
an
its principles
anthropologist
and methods.
Back then, the literal meaning of pseudo-archaeology was fake archaeology. Today, the definition is basically anything that uses archaeology in a manner that's unscientific. Now, these two are not mutually exclusive, but they are very much different concepts. I can use archaeological findings all day long in non-scientific manners and never once be mistaken for fake archaeology. To illustrate this point clearly, I frequently call myself a pseudo-archaeologist because I'll make armchair musings and use some archaeological evidence and put my own little stuff together, and I'll put it out into the public without doing all of the work that a real archaeologist would. That last part right there where I put it out into the public, that's the part that to me to me, makes myself feel like a pseudo-archaeologist. But again, this definition is a little bit on the nebulous side, isn't it? And maybe you think I'm wrong here, but the word pseudo-archaeology is derived from pseudoscience. I think we would all agree on that. And while pseudo-archaeology may be ill-defined, pseudoscience is very much clearly defined. According to Merriam-Webster, pseudoscience is a system of theories, assumptions, and methods erroneously regarded as scientific. Cambridge defines it as a system of thought or a theory that was not formed in a scientific way. Dictionary.com says basically the same thing. It's a system of unscientificness. So the whole point here is when Dr. Miano criticized Hawley for not using the definition that he brought up and calls a dictionary definition when it's not quite a dictionary definition, he's not just not being unfair. It's kind of ignorant, to be honest with you, because it's pretty clear when you look around that this definition is nebulous, and he was aware of this 2 years ago. So I think it's just kind of unfair on his part.
She probably disagrees, so she made her own. Here's how she extrapolates from the word pseudo. By logical deduction, a preliminary definition of a pseudo-archaeologist is, therefore, an inauthentic, not genuine, fake archaeologist, someone who calls themselves an archaeologist when they lack adequate qualifications or training, a sham. Her first definition is inadequate because it
Ooh, that's very cool. This comment is way more interesting to me than this video. That there's a nice exhibit that's ongoing at the Bowers Museum in California, Spirits and Headhunters, Art of the Pacific Islands. Obviously, I love the Pacific Islands. Wear this every day. I got this Koru necklace from some Tongan ladies in Hawaii who I'm going back to Hawaii next month. So I hope to see them again. I'm going to go back to the same flea market that I went to. And I also, I started asking them, and I forget, they were from Tonga. And I know that the Polynesian Islands are quite, some of them are pretty, they have rivalries between them. So I don't want to say the wrong word, but it's either Kappa or Tapa. It's pronounced differently in Tonga than it is in Tongan. They're related languages in Hawaii and all these different Polynesian, Samoa, Tonga, all of them. But they sold me, I think Kappa. I think Kappa is the Tongan word, but don't quote me. They make this fabric. I have it somewhere. I got to find it. They make it out of tree bark. It's really cool, and I bought one of those pieces. But before I did that, I started talking to them about it. And it was so cool for me to be talking to them because I love Polynesian stuff, and they were very happy to have someone like actually interested in like their culture and everything. And when I started talking about it, they pulled this necklace like out of the back, like it wasn't even there, and they sold me the Kappa and this at like half the normal marked price because I loved it, and I've worn it pretty much every day, but definitely always when I stream. I don't think there's a video of me not wearing it. There's probably one, but I don't know where it would be. I would feel wrong not wearing it. It's kind of a, this string will eventually break and I'm going to lose my mind. But yeah, it's somewhat of a ritual for me. Putting it on, it's when I have it. I can't do it anymore. I'm done. I can't do it. Yeah, I just want the information. And there's such a like, I don't know. Anyone got any questions? I think I might end the stream here just because, I don't want the animosity. I don't want all the freaking, like, it doesn't have to be this way. I would be willing with anybody to, anybody that's even said anything rude to me. Like, I don't care. Like, we'll put it past us. It's not a big deal. I just, I'd rather work together. But it's just so angry. It's so angry. Yeah, sucks. I'm going to make more stuff on the content. Try to stay away from the personal attacks, even though I receive them. But yeah, I'm gonna hop out of here. Thanks so much. Please like the video. Leave a comment on the video, like not a live comment, but like an actual comment. I would appreciate that. The algorithm, our apparent gods at this point, unfortunately. Yeah, check me out on Twitter and join the Discord for more conversations about all of it. Thanks for joining me, everybody. Thank you. Later.